Chapter 490. 490, Aurora. The next morning, before dawn, Sure and Happy arrived at the east side of East Pole City. At this moment, a green light screen seemed to be hanging down from the sky. And this light screen was still shaking. After a while, the light screen gradually turned blue, alternating between blue and green. In the dark blue night sky, the light screen was shaking faster and faster. It was as if the fairies in the sky were washing muslin. After a while, the light screen calmed down. Sure turned to look at Happy. He saw that Happy seemed to be very shocked. When she was on Earth, most of her childhood memories were spent in the base. After coming to the Flaming Continent, she basically lived on Hunting Island 1. She had never seen such a magical scene. Behind them, on the city wall of East Pole City, a few guards looked at Sure and Happy's backs from afar and discussed. They can't really be here to see the aurora, right? You're talking nonsense. Have you ever heard of someone running hundreds of thousands of kilometers just to see the aurora? I think it's strange too, but if they want to rob those ice caves, why don't they hurry up and go there instead of wasting time here? Who knows what they're up to? Anyway, they definitely don't have good intentions. Happy seemed to like the aurora. So Sure stayed in North Pole City for a few more days. He watched the aurora for 5 days. And during these 5 days, the ice cave also changed. It was said that several major forces of the Flaming Continent had already sent people to take a look. Finally, on the 6th day, the 3 most powerful forces of the Flaming Continent, the Ancient Flame Sect, the Ancient Dragon Sect, and the Mystic Moon Sect, had already sent a large number of disciples to North Pole Island. After coming to North Pole Island, they didn't go to North Pole City, but went directly to the huge ice cave. The 3 sects were basically led by one of their elders. Each sect sent 200 to 300 people. When the gold diggers saw the people of the 3 sects arrive, they all subconsciously retreated. And none of the gold diggers dared to say a word. Although they were unhappy, in the face of the 3 most powerful forces of the Flaming Continent, what did they dare to say? Did they not want to live anymore? The first-ranked elder of the Flame Origin Ancient Sect extended his hand and gestured to the other 2 sections. They wanted the 2 sects to make the announcement. However, the elders of the 2 sects returned the greeting and made an inviting gesture at the same time. The 2 sects did not dare to be arrogant in front of the Flame Dawn Ancient Sect. The elder of the Ancient Flame Sect nodded his head. What he meant was that since that was the case, he would gladly oblige. Although he didn't intend to give in, he still had to be polite on the surface. Then, he turned to the last disciple of the Flame Dawn Ancient Sect leader and said, "Jiu Ping, you do it." Jiu Ping was the sect master's personal disciple. He was also the next sect master who was appointed by the sect master. Nowadays, the sect master rarely showed himself. The affairs of the sect were all handled by a few elders. And now, these elders are consciously pushing Jiu Ping out. Now that he had reached the Grand Desolate Master level, it was time for him to slowly take over the Flame-beginning Ancient Sect. That Jiu Ping had a handsome appearance, and he looked refined and courteous, like a modest gentleman. He didn't have the arrogance of the disciples of the other sections. He cupped his fists and bowed to the thousands of gold diggers present. Then, he said, "Everyone, it's a good thing that you found Crystal Source ore in this cave. Our Flame Dawn Ancient Sect is also happy to see everyone become rich. However, a few days ago, the experts of our Flame Dawn Ancient Sect, Ancient Dragon Gate, and Mystic Moon Female Sect have analyzed these caves and found that there is a certain gas element inside. This gas element has never appeared in our Flame Dawn continent before. According to our research, this gas is extremely unstable and can easily explode. Furthermore, this gas came from a hunting ground called Earth." When the gold diggers heard this, they were all shocked. From a hunting ground? How was that possible? One had to know that in theory, the gas from Earth could have been brought to the Flame Dawn continent by humans. However, it was impossible for it to appear in this cave. Therefore, there must be something fishy about this. Jiu Ping paused and looked at the gold diggers around him. Then, he continued, therefore, our Flame Dawn Ancient Sect, Ancient Dragon Gate, and Mystic Moon Female Sect plan to work together to find out what dangers are in this cave. Before we figure out the dangers in this cave, it's best for everyone to stay away from this ice cave. The gold diggers looked at each other. In the end, a few gold diggers said, in that case, the three sects are also thinking about everyone's safety. We thank the three sections. Saying this, he cupped his fists towards the three sects and slowly left. With the first, the second, and third were simple. Then, more and more gold diggers turned and left. Of course, they didn't believe Jiu Ping's words. These gold diggers couldn't survive in other places on the Flame Dawn continent, so they came to the North Pole Island. They had experienced the coldness of human nature and seen all kinds of people. They naturally knew that Jiu Ping's words were just empty words. In fact, the three sects clearly knew that there were many caves here and that there were many crystal source ores in these caves, so they wanted to take over these caves. They made it sound dignified, but they were actually a bunch of bandits. However, in front of the three sects, no one dared to resist. They could only grit their teeth and swallow it down. The disciples of the three sects watched as the gold diggers around them gradually left. Although they didn't say anything, their faces were expressionless. However, their eyes revealed a hint of pride. This was the strength of the three great sections. This was the pride of the disciples of the three sections. In the entire Flame Dawn continent, no faction dared to fight against the three sections. It was also at this time that Immortal and Happy arrived. When they saw the gold diggers slowly leaving, Happy was a bit puzzled. Immortal casually plundered the memories of one of the gold diggers and understood the whole story. He shook his head slightly, but didn't care. In this world, there were many hardships. He wasn't the parents of these gold diggers, nor was he their friend. He had no obligation to stand up for them. If he had to intervene every time he encountered injustice, then he wouldn't be able to do anything in his life. At this time, one of the gold diggers saw that Immortal and Happy were still going forward. He sneered and muttered to himself, the three sects have already taken over the catacombs, and there are still people looking for trouble. Ha! Some people even stopped and turned to look at Immortal's back. They were waiting to see Immortal make a fool of himself. Chapter 491. Who the hell is he? The gold diggers saw Immortal and Happy walking against the flow of people to the edge of the ice cave. They all sneered inwardly. It was obvious that the three great sects knew that there was a crystal source ore in the ice cave, so they wanted to occupy it. These two people actually still wanted to go over. This was clearly looking for trouble. Especially when they saw that this guy had brought along such a beautiful and innocent girl, they were even more displeased. How could such a brainless guy have a girlfriend? God must be blind. Yeah, a guy like him deserves to be single for the rest of his life. It doesn't matter if he goes looking for trouble, but it'll be a pity if he ends up hurting that girl. While these people discussed among themselves, Immortal dragged Happy to the edge of the ice cave. At the edge of the ice cave, a few disciples of the ancient dragon sect were secretly pleased when they saw that the gold diggers had no choice but to turn around and leave in front of the three great sections. However, at this moment, they saw two youngsters walking against the flow of people toward them. They could not help but sneer. Were these two people trying to challenge the prestige of the three great sects? An ancient dragon gate disciple shouted from 20 meters away. The three great sects are conducting business, so all unrelated people should make way. Don't you know? Immortal smiled faintly when he heard this. The three great sects are so domineering. The disciples of the ancient dragon sect had originally thought that the two of them would retreat in fear after hearing the names of the three great sections. Unexpectedly, this guy knew that they were the three great sects, yet he still dared to confront them directly. Was he crazy? Those disciples were a little angry at this time, and walked towards Immortal's side. A disciple said coldly, "Who do you think you're talking to?" "We." Just as he said this, his voice suddenly paused. It was as if someone had grabbed him by the neck when he was halfway through his sentence. When the others saw this disciple's strange behavior, they were somewhat puzzled. What's wrong? Only then did the disciple open his mouth and point at Immortal. He is. Before he could finish speaking, the other ancient Dragon Gate disciples saw Immortal's face clearly. Suddenly, he was shocked, as if thunder had exploded in his heart. Their gazes had been fixed on Happy, and they did not pay much attention to Immortal. This was practically the nature of every normal man. At this moment, they finally saw Immortal's face. He is Island Master Mo. When they recognized Immortal, they immediately felt that a disaster was imminent. After all, the sect had issued an order. He ordered all disciples not to provoke Island Master Mo. If they offended Island Master Mo, they would have to bear the consequences themselves. The sect would have nothing to do with them. There were even disciples who privately spread rumors that if they really offended this Island Master Mo, the sect would directly clean up the sect in order to avoid attracting trouble. They didn't know what kind of ability this Mr. Mo had to make the higher-ups of the sect so afraid. But from this, it could be seen that this Island Master Mo was definitely not simple. And now, the few of them had actually offended Island Master Mo. How could they not be terrified? Amidst the panic, a disciple was the first to react. He hurriedly walked towards Immortal, bowed deeply and said, "I'm sorry, Island Master Mo. I was blind and didn't recognize you. I'm really sorry for offending you." The few people behind him also reacted. They took a few steps forward and apologized to Immortal. "Island Master Mo, we were blind. Please forgive us." Immortal sneered and said, "Aren't the three great sects very domineering? Why did they suddenly change their masks?" Although the few people were mocked by Immortal, they did not dare to slight him in the slightest. They all lowered their heads. Sorry. We were wrong. We should have been slapped." As they spoke, they actually started slapping themselves. As long as Island Master Mo mentioned the mistakes that they had committed in front of their sect's upper echelons, they would very likely be expelled from their sect. In the distance, the gold diggers who were originally retreating were planning to laugh at Immortal. But when they saw this scene, they were all dumbfounded. Look at those ancient dragon sect disciples. What's going on? Slapping themselves? Damn, are they stupid? These are ancient dragon sect disciples. Isn't it too embarrassing for them to slap themselves? While they were shocked, they couldn't help but shift their gaze to Immortal. They had thought that Immortal was looking for trouble. He might even be seeking his own death. Never in their wildest dreams would they have imagined that the ancient Dragon Gate disciples would slap themselves when they saw them. Even if these gold diggers scratched their heads, they still couldn't figure out the reason behind it. At this moment, Immortal saw that the ancient dragon sect disciples were slapping themselves, but he didn't stop them. He no longer paid any attention to them and directly walked past them. The ancient dragon sect disciples didn't dare to stop. It was only when Immortal and Happy were far away that the strength they used to slap themselves slowly lessened. In the end, when Immortal and Happy's figures were blocked by an ice hill, they came to a stop. At this moment, their cheeks were red and swollen. They were also a little dazed by their own slaps. They looked at each other. After a while, an ancient dragon sect disciple asked, "What should we do?" The moment this question was asked, they fell into silence again. What should they do? What could they do now? They could only listen to orders. The hearts of these people were all in a state of uneasiness. At this moment, someone suddenly remembered, "Hurry up and tell the sect about Island Master Mo's arrival. Perhaps this can be considered as making up for our mistakes." Therefore, they hurriedly contacted their uncle masters. When their martial uncles heard this, their hearts trembled. They asked, "Are you sure it's Island Master Mo?" Those people replied, "We didn't dare to verify his identity. However, he looks exactly the same as Island Master Mo's portrait that was passed down by the sect." When those martial uncles heard this, their hearts trembled again. One of them said, "Did you offend him?" Those people's voices were much lower. We didn't mean to. We didn't recognize him at all." When those martial uncles heard this, they said, "You're on your own." With that, they hung up the call. They looked at each other in dismay once again. It's over. It's really over this time. Even their martial uncles said so. Weren't they really finished? At this moment, those martial uncles quickly reported this matter to the ancient dragon sex elders. The ancient dragon sex elders immediately notified the elders of the flame beginning ancient sect and the mystic moon sect. Therefore, in just a few minutes, the three major sects were on high alert. Under such circumstances, Sure and Happy slowly appeared in front of everyone's eyes. More than 1,000 people were present, but no one made a sound. Sure was a little confused. What was going on? Chapter 492. When Sure and Happy crossed an ice hill and appeared in front of the crowd. The crowd of more than 1,000 people actually stood in an orderly manner, all of them silently and solemnly, not a single person uttered a single word. Sure was a little surprised. However, after casually plundering the memories of two people to check, he knew the reason for this. They knew that he was coming. At this moment, three elders who looked to be in their 70s or 80s walked quickly towards Sure. Two of them were men and one was a woman. The men were wearing the sect master robes of the ancient dragon sect and the flame dawn ancient sect. The woman was wearing a white robe with gray patterns on her sleeves. Obviously, she was an elder of the mystic moon female sect. They walked quickly to Sure's side and said, "I didn't know you were coming. I didn't know that Island Master Mo would be coming. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you. I heard that a disciple offended Island Master Mo. Island Master Mo, please tell us what you want to do with them. It's time for our ancient Flame Dawn sect to reorganize our sect." Sure did not pursue the matter. He only wanted to teach those people a lesson. There was no need to harp on it. After all, his current strength was second to none in the Flame Dawn continent. If he still harped on a few small fries like before, he would be too petty. He shook his head and asked, "Have the three sects found anything in this ice cave?" The three of them looked at each other. The elder from the Mystic Moon female sect spoke first. "We didn't find anything substantial. However, there are unknown gases in all the caves. We've done some preliminary research on the unknown gases, but we haven't come to any conclusions yet." Sure didn't want to expose their true purpose. He only asked, "Do you mind if I go down and take a look?" The elders of the three sects did not dare to mind at all. No matter how unwilling they were, they did not dare to show it on their faces. "Of course, please go ahead, Island Master Mo. However, Island Master Mo, we haven't explored the end of these caves. There might be danger inside, so for your safety, don't go too far after entering these caves." Sure nodded and said, "Island Master Mo, got it." Then, with a thought, a person that looked exactly like Sure began to materialize beside him. At first, it was bones. The bones quickly extended and formed a complete human skeleton. Then, muscles and blood vessels appeared on the skeleton. There was also a heart in his chest. Finally, the skin covered the body. It formed a human being. A human that was exactly the same as Sure. This was Sure's virus clone. In the past, the virus clones could only be formed from the flesh and blood of infected people. But now, Sure could already induce the virus, and then make the virus quickly divide and replicate. In the end, a complete individual was formed. When the crowd saw Sure's method, they realized that he had created an exact replica of himself out of thin air. Furthermore, this person could blink and walk. It was no different from the main body. This made them all widen their eyes. What kind of godly method was this? However, this was only the beginning. Then, the second, the third, the fourth, the 100th. A total of 100 doppelgangers were formed. Everyone was dumbfounded. Creating a doppelganger out of thin air was already shocking enough. Now, He had actually created 100 doppelgangers. This was simply not something that a human could do. After that, Emosher gave the order. Go. The 100 doppelgangers immediately jumped out of the large ice cave. Then, they randomly jumped into the caves on the walls of the ice cave. When the elders of the three major sects saw this, they all cried bitterly in their hearts. But they did not even dare to fart. Not to mention other things, just the method of creating 100 doppelgangers out of thin air was unheard of. In the face of such an expert, what else did they dare to say? Even if they knew that this expert was here for the crystal source ores, they did not dare to say anything. Emosher controlled the 100 doppelgangers and entered the 100 caves around the ice cave. These caves, as a whole, went downwards. They went deeper and deeper. After walking for more than 500 meters, his doppelgangers discovered that crystal source ores began to appear on the ground. At first, there were not many crystal source ores. They only appeared on the walls occasionally. After walking for another 5 kilometers, there were more and more crystal source ores. There were already specks of crystal source ores on the walls, as many as the stars in the sky. After walking for more than 10 kilometers, there were even more crystal source ores on the ground and on the ice walls on both sides. Furthermore, the top of his head was filled with crystal source ores. The crystal source ores emitted a fluorescent light, illuminating the entire cave green. Emosher had read some information about crystal source ores before. However, those crystal source ores were basically within 1 cubic meter. If there were 10 crystal source ores, it would be considered a very high-quality crystal source ores. Now, these crystal source ores were basically all over the walls of the cave. This greatly surprised Emosher. What was certain was that the crystal source ores here were not naturally formed. The caves here seemed to be man-made. The crystal source veins in this place were also artificially embedded in the surroundings. There were more than 1,000 caves here. He did not know how deep each cave was. If there were so many crystal source ores in each cave, then how many crystal source ores were there in the entire ice cave? Even the three great factions and the former dragon clan would not be able to take out such a huge amount of crystal source ores. What kind of person, what kind of faction would hide these crystal source ores here for? With such doubts in his mind, Emosher ordered each of his doppelgangers to use their dragon senses to explore the cave as they continued to walk forward. His doppelgangers walked along the crystal source ores corridor. They continued to explore the cave with their dragon senses. After walking for about 50 kilometers, there seemed to be no change in the surroundings. However, at this time, all of Emosher's doppelgangers seemed to have reached the end of the cave 50 kilometers in front of them. Their dragon senses could no longer explore the cave. Emosher was puzzled. He clearly felt that there was still space in front of him, but his dragon senses could not explore it. This feeling was the same as when he used his dragon senses to explore the cave at Full Heart Waterfall. While puzzled, he controlled his doppelgangers and continued to move forward. However, after walking for about 10 kilometers, something strange happened. Almost all of his doppelgangers lost contact with him in an instant. It was as if there was suddenly no signal. Emosher could not help but be shocked. Chapter 493. The scene just now was very strange. Emosher's clones didn't detect any danger in the surroundings at all. But in an instant, he lost contact with these clones. It was like a phone suddenly losing its signal. Emosher frowned slightly. When the elders of the three major sects saw Emosher frown, their hearts trembled slightly. But before Emosher said anything, none of them dared to say anything to disturb Emosher. After a while, Emosher turned around and said to the elders of the three major sects, "Continue. You guys can continue." Then, he brought Happy and left the ice cave. He didn't know what kind of danger was in the ice cave. But losing contact with his clones just now made him feel uneasy. So he decided to leave this place for the time being. The three elders hurriedly lowered their heads and said, "Yes, yes." But when they came back to their senses, they all felt strange. Could it be that Island Master Mo didn't come for the crystal source ore? But if he came for the crystal source, or why did he suddenly leave? The three elders looked at each other in dismay. But after a while, they suppressed the doubts in their hearts. Although they didn't know why Island Master Mo suddenly left, it was a good thing that he left. As long as Island Master Mo left, the crystal source or here would be divided equally among the three major sections. No other forces would dare to fight with them. Of course, they also kept an eye on it. Maybe Island Master Mo's clones just now found something wrong down there. Not a single one of his 100 clones came back. It's very likely that there's some kind of danger down there. So it's best that we don't act rashly for the time being. Let's report this situation to the sects first and then make a decision. That's all we can do. Thus, the three of them reported what they had just encountered to the sect. When the higher-ups of the three major sects heard that they had encountered Island Master Mo, they attached great importance to this matter. They also heard that Island Master Mo had hurriedly left after sending his 100 clones down. This made them even more interested in the ice cave and even more vigilant. Therefore, they sent more people and brought more equipment and instruments to explore the ice cave. As for Mo Sure, he had already left North Pole Island with Happy. Continue to travel the world, see all the beautiful sceneries in the world, and taste all the delicacies in the world. His days were spent comfortably and comfortably. 2 months later, news from the three major sects arrived. All the ice caves collapsed. About 500 disciples of the three major sects were trapped in the ice cave. The three great sects hurriedly organized people to rescue him day and night. Finally, on the 5th day, they managed to rescue the disciples. Contrary to their expectations, none of these disciples died except for some minor injuries and excessive fright. After that, the three sects brought the disciples back to their sections. On one hand, they arranged for specialized doctors to treat them, and on the other hand, they arranged for a psychiatrist to intervene and treat them after the psychological creation. In the beginning, everything went smoothly. The injuries of these disciples were quickly healed. The disciples who were shocked gradually calmed down. But on this day, something unexpected happened. The disciples of the Flame Dawn Ancient Sect lived in an apartment. A female psychologist was counseling a disciple who had been overly shocked. She had a warm smile on her face and said, "He Fong, you've almost fully recovered. Today is the last treatment. After today, you can cultivate and live normally." The disciple nodded. "Thank you for taking care of me during this time." The psychologist smiled and shook her head. "It's what I should do." As she spoke, she turned around and packed her clothes, intending to leave. However, when she had just put on her coat and turned around, she was shocked. Because He Fong, who was sitting on the chair just now, had already arrived behind her. He was face to face with her. The two of them were less than an inch apart. Moreover, there was a hint of fiery light in He Fong's eyes. The psychologist was slightly taken aback and asked, "He Fong, it was fine if she didn't speak." When she said this, He Fong's gaze became even more fervent. He suddenly reached out and grabbed the psychologist tightly. The psychologist repeatedly shouted, "He Fong, this is not good. Let go of me, let go of me. If you don't let go, I'll scream." Only then did she understand that He Fong already had ill intentions towards her. He Fong ignored the psychologist's cries. His eyes flashed with a beast-like eagerness. He opened his mouth and bit down on the psychologist's neck. Hiss, this bite actually tore off a piece of flesh. The psychologist was in so much pain that she almost fainted. Her heart was filled with extreme fear. Just now, she thought that He Fong was just going to do something beastly to her. She didn't expect this guy to become a real beast. "Help, help me," the psychologist screamed out in shock. A sharp and ear-piercing voice penetrated the door and echoed in the entire corridor. At the same time, she kept struggling. But her strength was far inferior to He Fong's. She was tightly grabbed by He Fong and couldn't escape at all. Crack, the door was kicked open. 2 disciples of the Flame Dawn Ancient Sect barged in. When they saw the scene in front of them, they were also stunned. There was a bloody hole in the psychologist's neck that was constantly spurting out blood. He Feng's mouth and chest were full of blood. It was easy to guess what he was doing. F***CK. He Feng, you son of a b***tch, what are you doing? He Feng, I'm going to beat you to death. The two disciples pounced on He Feng. When He Feng saw this, he suddenly turned around and faced the two disciples. The strength of these two disciples was about the same as He Feng. They had both reached level 10. But now, He Feng was fighting without any regard for his life. And he didn't attack like a human. Instead, he pounced and bit like a beast. These two disciples were actually forced to retreat. During the battle, He Feng bit another disciple's wrist. That disciple felt the pain and hurriedly retreated. Just as they were fighting, the third disciple had already jumped in through the window. He picked up the psychiatrist and pulled her out of the room. At the same time, more than 10 disciples had already rushed over from the corridor. These disciples worked together and condensed a genetic martial art. After breaking He Feng's 2 legs and 2 arms, they were able to control him. At this moment, they took a closer look at He Feng. They saw that He Feng's eyes had already turned black. The fingertips of his hands were actually more than an inch long and were extremely hard. 4 fangs had also grown out of his mouth. He looked very scary. Although his arms and legs were broken, he didn't seem to care at all. It continued to try to get up and open its mouth to bite the disciples around it. Chapter 494. Mo Shi continued to tour the continent happily. On the other hand, the number 1 sect of the Flaming Origin continent, the Flaming Origin Ancient Sect, was undergoing a drastic change. He Feng was finally under control after biting 2 people in the Flaming Origin Ancient Sect. The other disciple took the opportunity to rescue the female psychiatrist. When they looked at He Feng again, the area around his eyes had turned greenish-black. Sharp claws and fangs had grown out. He was like a wild beast, constantly roaring. When he looked at the surrounding disciples, his gaze was like that of a bloodthirsty beast. A few disciples hurriedly went to inform their superiors. However, when their superiors hurried over, another scream was heard from the other side. A few more disciples hurriedly rushed in the direction of the scream. They saw that the female psychologist who was bitten just now had a mouth full of blood. Her eyes had turned greenish-black. 2 half-inch sharp teeth were exposed at the corner of her mouth. Her fingernails were also more than an inch long. When she saw these humans, her gaze was like that of a wild beast. When the other disciples saw this, they hurriedly went forward and tried to control the female psychologist. However, at this moment, another scream was heard from the other side. It turned out that the disciple who had his finger bitten off by He Feng had also mutated. At the same time, in the Flaming Origin Ancient Sect, the disciples' apartments were filled with screams. Disciples were mutating everywhere. One had to know that there were more than 80 disciples who were trapped in the ice cave. Now, these 80 disciples suddenly mutated at the same time. The surrounding disciples were caught off guard and were either scratched or bitten. Then, they mutated one after another. The speed of mutation was not fast in the beginning. After being scratched, it would take more than 5 minutes for the mutation to take place. However, when the disciples who were scratched went to scratch others, the speed at which these people mutated became faster. The more people there were in the middle of the mutation, the faster the mutation speed. 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute. In less than 15 minutes, those who were scratched had their mutation speed reduced to 1 minute. When the higher-ups of the Flaming Origin Ancient Sect rushed over, more than 500 disciples had already been infected. When the elders of the Flaming Origin Ancient Sect saw this, they could only make up their minds and send out a wave of energy to kill these 500 disciples. After these 500 disciples were killed, all the remaining disciples fell silent. All of them wore pained expressions. Some of the disciples who were killed were their friends, while others were their brothers. Yet, there was nothing they could do. They could only watch as their friends and brothers died here. However, Their bitter and sorrowful emotions did not last long before they were replaced by shock. The muscles on the bodies of the mutated disciples who had been blasted into pieces of flesh and blood were wriggling rapidly. The wound was healing rapidly. There were even 2 disciples who were blasted into meat paste, but at this time, the meat paste was flowing. Then, they quickly converged. The silhouette of a human began to emerge from the meat paste. When the surrounding people saw this, they were all terrified. The great elder shouted, "Everyone, step back." On the flaming origin continent, it wasn't rare for one to recover quickly after being injured. Even if some people were hit in the heart, they would be able to recover quickly in a short time. However, no matter who it was, as long as their head was blown off, there was basically no possibility of recovery. However, these 2 fellows had clearly been blasted into minced meat, yet they were still able to revive. How could this not make the crowd panic? The great elder, as a level 4 Grand Desolate Master, was unable to kill these 2 fellows. Moreover, it wasn't just these 2 fellows. The other mutated disciples who had just been blasted to death slowly stood up at this time. Seeing this, the great elder could only wave his right hand and condense an energy light shield. These mutated disciples were all shrouded in it. Those mutated disciples rushed towards the light shield one after another. However, the light shield did not move at all. Only then did the surrounding disciples let out a sigh of relief. At this moment, the other elders had also rushed over. After they understood the situation, they all began to speculate. Are they infected with some kind of virus? Is it the zombie virus? It doesn't seem like it. The zombie virus's infectivity is not so terrifying. Then what kind of virus is it? This needs to be carefully studied. After a simple discussion, they found a few virus specialists in the sect. The virus specialists put on their energy protective suits. This kind of energy protective suit had an outer and inner layer that was a normal physical protective suit. The interlayer in the middle was a layer of energy. This kind of energy was very good at isolating viruses. Basically, there was no known virus that could break through this kind of energy protective suit. After that, the great elder used the energy again to blast the mutated disciples within the light shield. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the 2 disciples carefully passed through the light shield and entered the range of the virus. They planned to collect some virus samples. However, at this time, Sanguisurincus suddenly grew out of the blood on the ground. These Sanguisurincus seemed to be alive. They slowly climbed along the legs of the 2 experts, climbed up their energy protective suits, and climbed up their bodies. The 2 of them were not panicked at first. After all, they were wearing energy protective suits. However, soon, their faces revealed a look of horror. They saw that on these Sanguisurincus, there were many small spikes. These spikes were constantly stabbing the protective suits. There were many small holes in the protective suits. The great elder who was outside was shocked. These protective suits were all made of special materials. The protective properties were extremely good. Even knives and swords could not cut open a crack. Now, the spikes on these Sanguisurincus could actually pierce through the protective suits. He quickly shouted, "Both of you, get out of here." The 2 disciples hurriedly retreated out of the light shield. Just as they were retreating out of the light shield, the energy in the energy protective suits kept leaking out through the hundreds and thousands of small holes. When they reached the edge of the light shield, the energy in their protective suits had completely leaked out. At this time, the Sanguisurincus entangled their bodies again, the spikes kept stabbing their protective suits. The protective suit was easily pierced through as if it was made of paper. The 2 of them suddenly screamed in horror and pain. Ah, no! However, no matter how loudly they screamed, even if their elders were close by, they could not save them. On the contrary, the great elder saw that the 2 of them were beyond saving and raised his right hand. In his right hand, a mass of energy had already condensed. "Great elder, what are you doing?" "Great elder, please, I can still be saved." Boom! In the midst of their pleas, the 2 of them had already turned into 2 piles of blood. Chapter 495. The 2 disciples of the ancient flame sect had been killed by their grand elder. The other disciples in the surroundings were all extremely shocked. Although they knew that the grand elder had no choice but to do so. If the 2 disciples had escaped, it would have caused more casualties. It was obvious that they had been infected with some kind of virus. The Grand Elder had finally managed to control the virus with the energy shield. If they had escaped, it would not have been so easy to control them again. At the same time, the ancient dragon sect, which was ranked second on the Flaming Dawn continent, was experiencing the same thing. In the end, their sect master had used a similar method to trap the virus. The Mystic Moon sect, which was ranked third, was also experiencing the same outbreak. The sect master of the Mystic Moon sect had used the same method to control the virus. However, she had only used the energy shield to control the virus. Within the energy shield, the infected disciples had been killed countless times, but they were still able to survive. This caused everyone present to be extremely terrified. They reported this situation to the island masters of the various hunting islands on the continent. After watching the video of the scene, the island masters fell silent. Some of the island masters even had a trace of fear in their eyes. Viruses had always existed on the Flaming Dawn continent, especially on the hunting islands. The island masters of the hunting islands had developed all kinds of viruses in order to allow the creatures on the hunting grounds to continue to mutate. The most typical ones were the zombie virus, vampire virus, and werewolf virus. Among these 4 viruses, the zombie virus spread the fastest and was the most destructive. Therefore, all the island masters of the hunting islands strictly controlled these viruses. However, no matter how powerful a virus was, it could always kill its host. As long as the host of the virus was killed, the transmission of the virus would be greatly reduced. However, this new virus could not be killed at all. Not only could it not be killed, but it also consumed a lot of energy to maintain the energy shield. Once the energy supply ran out, the shield could break at any time, causing the virus to flow out again. Many research institutions on the hunting islands brought many professional instruments to the 3 sects to study these viruses. Although the virus could not be brought out of the shield, they could extend the instruments into the shield to investigate. In the end, after 3 days of research, they came to a conclusion. This virus was the zombie virus. However, it was not the traditional zombie virus, but a mutated one. They called it the new zombie virus. These new zombie viruses had a stronger ability to spread and were very difficult to kill. Therefore, the 3 major sects agreed to let the virus research institutions of the hunting islands stay in their sects to study the zombie virus. However, just 5 days later, the situation changed again. On the 5th day, faint green spots began to appear on the skin of these researchers. Especially around their eyes, dark circles began to appear. At first, they didn't pay much attention to it, thinking that it was just because they had stayed up late to work. But later, as time passed, more and more green spots appeared on their bodies, and they were getting bigger and bigger. They finally panicked. After a virus test, a new type of zombie virus was detected from their bodies. This filled the hearts of these staff members with despair. They had watched the videos about the new zombie virus and knew what happened to those infected with the new zombie virus. They didn't want to die. However, if they did not enter the light barrier, once their bodies were completely controlled by the virus, they would lose their consciousness and attack humans like wild beasts. Thus, after some hesitation, some virus researchers reported this matter to the higher-ups of the 3 major sections. At the same time, they did some research on the virus in their bodies. In the end, they came to a frightening conclusion: the new zombie virus could be spread through the air. The zombie virus was very scary, but it was only spread through contact. And this new zombie virus could actually be spread through the air. In other words, everyone who went to the North Pole Island could have been infected. And now, all the disciples of the 3 major sects could have been infected. This discovery caused the 3 major sects to be extremely panicked. They hurriedly organized their disciples to conduct a virus test. As a result, 30% of the disciples of the three major sects were infected. It must be known that the three major sects had more than 1 million disciples combined. 30% of the disciples were infected, which meant that more than 300,000 disciples had been infected. Moreover, although the rest of the disciples were not infected, the virus could be spread through the air. Therefore, every second they stayed in the sects increased their chances of being infected. Thus, the disciples of the three major sects who were not infected began to flee the three major sections. Although the higher-ups of the sects knew about this, they couldn't stop them. If they didn't let them escape, were they supposed to let them stay here and be infected? At this time, the three major sects could only place their hopes on those research groups. Unfortunately, the research groups held a pessimistic attitude toward the new zombie virus. Many researchers had already entered the energy barrier on their own. This was tantamount to suicide. However, there were also a small number of virus researchers who found an opportunity to escape the three major sects. Without a doubt, these researchers had all been infected by the virus. If they escaped from the three major sects, the consequences would be unimaginable. Although the three major sects did their utmost to search for them, there were still 5 fish that escaped the net in the end. No one knew where they had fled to. The several hundred researchers who had been captured could only forcibly send them into the energy barrier. Previously, they had made a lot of contributions and sacrifices in order to research the virus. But now, if they were to leave, the whole continent might be in huge trouble. This was the truth. Although they couldn't bear it, they still had to send them into the energy barrier. However, although the three major sects barely managed to control the situation, they weren't the only ones who had entered the ice cave at that time. On the North Pole Island, many gold diggers had entered the ice cave. Even those who hadn't been to the ice cave had gone to the edge of the ice cave. And these people had basically all been infected by the new zombie virus. Therefore, this was a huge hidden danger. Although the three major sects thought of many methods, it was useless. In the end, they could only release a joint announcement to the world. Joint announcement from the Ancient Flame Sect, Ancient Dragon Sect, and Mystic Moon Female Sect. A new zombie virus has entered the flaming continent. This virus can be transmitted through the air and through contact. Remind everyone on the flaming continent to prepare a gas mask. If you encounter a person with a green body, black eye circles, fangs, and sharp claws, run away as soon as possible. Don't try to kill them, because they can't be killed. Chapter 496. This joint announcement caused an uproar in the entire flaming land. Although the three sects were very domineering most of the time, they would find some high-sounding reasons to do things. But for such a big event to be jointly announced by the three sects, it couldn't be fake. For a time, the entire flaming land was in a state of panic. All the major forces began to seal their gates. All the hunting islands began to seal their islands. Although it would cost a lot. But compared to human lives, no matter how big the price, it was not worth mentioning. After contacting the three sects and confirming the authenticity of the incident, the government also began to seal the roads and cities. Even the government confirmed that it was true, so the people naturally knew that it couldn't be fake. Therefore, all the gas masks in the shopping malls and shops were sold out. As cultivators, many people could hold their breath for a long time. Even after becoming a hunter, it was not difficult to hold their breath for a month. But no one could hold their breath forever. So people were crazily fighting for gas masks. And all the manufacturers of gas masks were also speeding up the production of gas masks. Many manufacturers that did not produce gas masks in the past also opened many gas mask production lines. But even so, it was far from enough for everyone to buy a gas mask. After all, the population of the flaming land was as high as 50 trillion. The daily production of gas masks in the flaming land was only a little more than 100,000. This was because almost everyone in the flaming land was a cultivator. Most of the time, if they encountered a special situation, they could survive by holding their breath. There was no need to use gas masks. Only those who worked in poisonous gas all year round could use gas masks. while people were crazily fighting for gas masks. In a remote mountain village. One night, a disciple who had escaped from the Flaming Land ancient sect sneaked in. In the middle of the night, there was a burst of screams in the village. This scream woke up all the villagers in the village. What followed was more than half an hour of screams. Half an hour later, the village fell into silence. All the villagers fell into a pool of blood. The next morning, many zombies appeared in the village. All of them had green faces and fangs. Their eyes were dead. Then, they ran in all directions. These zombies were not as stupid as zombies. Among these zombies, even the lowest level zombies were transformed from hunters. Therefore, not only were they very strong, but their intelligence was also higher than normal humans. Of course, the most terrifying thing was that they couldn't be killed at all. Even a grand desolate master would not be able to do anything to them. Left with no other choice, they could only resort to methods that they had no other choice. That was nuclear weapons. After confirming that there was no one in a certain place, they would use nuclear flattening on those places. As a result, many places on the Flaming Dawn continent were devastated. When the people on Hunting Island No. 1 heard about this, they all felt a sense of familiarity. They had experienced such an apocalyptic world back on Earth. What was happening on the Flaming Dawn continent was nothing more than a reenactment of the apocalypse on Earth. As for the fact that the virus could not be killed, they were not worried. Their dragon master, Mr. Mo, had brought them all the way from Earth. In less than 3 years, they had reached the peak of the Flaming Origin continent. No matter how ferocious the virus was, the Dragon Lord would be able to resolve it for them. As for Mo, sure, he had a strange feeling. He felt that it was very ironic. Of course, it was not ironic to himself, but to the humans on the Flaming Dawn continent. The people on the Flaming Dawn continent treated each planet as a hunting ground and threw the virus on these planets. Then they hunted the creatures on these hunting grounds. Now, the zombie virus had also appeared on the Flaming Dawn continent. The Flaming Dawn continent had also fallen into an apocalyptic disaster. It was really the cycle of the heavens and retribution. However, he was also thinking about how these viruses had come about. Could it be that creatures from a higher dimension had thrown these viruses onto the Flaming Dawn continent? Of course, Mo Sher's idea was just his wild guess. He still had to take a look at these viruses. He had to see where these viruses came from. So on this day, he came to the known origin of the viruses, North Pole Island. He hovered above North Pole Island and used his dragon sense to investigate below. He saw that the entire North Pole city was almost filled with zombies. The people living here were the first to be infected. There used to be more than 50,000 people living on North Pole Island. Now, there were more than 50,000 new zombies here. He used the demon dragon's eye to look at these zombies, and the attributes of these zombies quickly appeared in his mind. Species, General Corpse, Level 3 General Corpse, equivalent to Level 3 Scavenger, Special Ability, Immortality. Mo Sher was a little confused. What was a General Corpse? The system's voice sounded frowny face one of the 4 great zombie ancestors, Jiangchen. The zombies infected by him are called General Corpses. General Corpses have the trait of immortality, so they are also called Immortal Corpses. Hearing this, Mo Sher's heart skipped a beat. Once, when he was on Earth, he had seen an owl. At first, he thought that the owl had been infected with the zombie virus. But later, he found that the owl could not be killed. At that time, when he used the demon blood's eye to look, he found that the owl had the heart of Jiangchen and could not be killed. He did not expect to encounter zombies infected by Jiangchen after coming to the Flaming Dawn continent. Mo Sher pondered for a moment and planned to use memory plunder to check the memories of these zombies. He wanted to see where they came from. However, under his investigation, he found that the memories of these zombies were completely chaotic. He could not find anything. Mo Sher did not investigate further. With a thought, he said in his mind, System, select the reward check-in and sign in the demon-suppressing orb. The system's voice quickly sounded, this check-in will consume 1.5 million evolution points. Confirm check-in. Mosher glanced at the balance of evolution points in his mind. He saw that behind the 3 words evolution points was a long string of numbers. As for how many trillions of evolution points there were, he was too lazy to count. Ever since he came to the Flaming Dawn continent, evolution points were rarely used. But as long as he killed infected creatures, he would always receive the corresponding evolution points. Confirm check-in. Mosher said. Soon, a walnut-sized orb appeared in his backpack. This bead was sparkling and translucent. It was an orb nurtured by the dragon's body and was full of righteousness. A single orb could suppress 10,000 demons. Mosher had used it once in the vampire's lair on Earth. After that, because it consumed too many evolution points, he never used it again. Today, he would try to see if this demon-suppressing orb was still as powerful when it encountered a general corpse. Chapter 497. With a thought, Mosher took out the demon-suppressing orb from his system backpack. The orb's surface looked crystal clear. But if one looked closely, they would find that it contained some kind of extremely violent energy. This kind of energy was very unfamiliar to Mosher. It was not like the energy in human cultivators' bodies. It was also not like the energy in zombies, or desolate beasts' bodies. At this moment, the zombies below also noticed Mosher in the sky. They immediately jumped into the air. These general corpses could not fly, but they could all jump very high. Even the lowest level 1 general corpse could jump up to more than 10 meters high. As for the mutated general corpses, which were equivalent to desolate hunters, they could jump up to 100 meters high. Mosher slightly increased his altitude. He let himself reach a height of more than 700 meters. These general corpses would no longer be able to reach him. Then, he held the demon-suppressing orb in his right hand. At a certain moment, his right index finger and thumb loosened. The demon-suppressing orb quietly fell. As the general corpses around it kept jumping up, it quietly fell from the middle of these general corpses as if it was weightless. Some general corpses also noticed the falling orb. They pounced straight at the orb. They reached out to grab the orb. However, after the orb fell into their hands, it was not affected at all. And their hands were like snow meeting burning charcoal. A hole was melted in their hands. A few more general corpses pounced over. But these general corpses' bodies were all pierced through by the orb. This orb seemed to be falling gently. However, nothing could affect its whereabouts. A moment later, it slowly landed. The next moment, a blood-red light instantly burst out from within the orb. This blood-red light was extremely dazzling. Everything within a 10-kilometer radius had turned into a blood-red world. There was no sound, only the blood-red color that filled all the space. A moment later, the blood-red color disappeared. And half of all the general corpses within 10 kilometers disappeared. The general corpses 10 kilometers away only saw the sudden appearance of the red light. A moment later, the red light disappeared. Their kind had already disappeared without a trace. It was as if they had never appeared in this world. Each and every one of them was greatly shocked. These corpse generals seemed to only know how to run around like headless flies. But that was because they couldn't be killed. Therefore, they were fearless and pressed forward courageously. However, one had to know that their IQ was higher than that of normal humans. How could they not be alarmed when they suddenly saw their companion disappear so inexplicably? Overwhelmed with fear, the corpse generals began to flee in all directions. When Mosher saw this, he couldn't help but shake his head. A general corpse was nothing more than this. Actually, it wasn't that the general corpse wasn't powerful. Mosher's demon-suppressing orb was simply too powerful. At this moment, Mosher looked into his mind. The kill points in his mind had already reached 4 billion. As long as he could get 6 billion kill points, he would be promoted to a level 10 desolate hunter. This meant that if he killed ordinary general corpses, he would only get 1 kill point for every 10 general corpses. But don't forget that many parts of the continent have been infected. Moreover, judging from the rate at which the zombie virus was spreading, it would probably spread across the entire continent very soon. There were hundreds of billions of desolate hunters on the entire continent. Therefore, it wouldn't be difficult for him to become a level 10 desolate hunter. However, Emosher didn't want the entire continent to be infected by the virus. If the entire continent was infected by the virus, even if he eliminated all the virus in the end, there would only be a few people left on Hunting Island 1. What was the point? At this moment, Emosher looked down at the general corpses that were fleeing in all directions. He wasn't too satisfied with the attack range of the demon-suppressing orb. His draconic will moved and blasted at the general corpses. Boom 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 boom. The general corpses all exploded. But in just a moment, the general corpses recovered to their original state. Emosher shook his head slightly. In the past, whether it was the zombie virus or other viruses, his draconic will could suppress their recovery ability. But now, it seemed that his draconic will had no effect on the zombie virus. He could only ask in his mind, "System, can the demon-suppressing orb be upgraded?" The system's voice replied frowny face yes, but after the upgrade, the evolution points required for each check-in will increase by 10 times. Emosher nodded, then upgrade it. Soon, the system's voice sounded frowny face upgrade successful. After the upgrade, each designated check-in will consume 15 million evolution points. Emosher looked at the evolution points in his mind. There were so many that he felt it was just a string of numbers. He said, "System, designate the demon-suppressing orb to check-in." Check-in successful. Check-in reward, 1 demon-suppressing orb. Emosher moved his mind and took out the upgraded demon-suppressing orb from his backpack. The upgraded demon-suppressing orb was no longer the size of a walnut. Instead, it was the size of a fist. He narrowed his eyes and carefully sensed it. The energy contained in this demon-suppressing orb was dozens of times more powerful than the previous demon-suppressing orb. Emosher let go of his hand gently. The demon-suppressing orb was still like rain, slowly falling. After a moment, it landed gently. The moment it landed, a dazzling red light appeared again. But this time, the range of the dazzling red light expanded by 10 times. Within a radius of 100 kilometers, all infected humans and animals were instantly annihilated in this red light. When the red light disappeared, this world of ice and snow seemed so clean and clear. There was not a trace of impurities. Emosher looked down at this world wrapped in silver and snow and shook his head slightly. The world here was supposed to be like this. He moved his mind and instantly teleported to the edge of the ice cave. He saw that the ice cave had already collapsed. Only a huge ice cave with a radius of more than 10 kilometers was left. Emosher used his dragon will to carefully investigate this place, but he did not find anything else. He paused for a moment before rushing in the direction of the first hunting island. The first hunting island had the support of the Dragon Palace. Its current defense could defend against attacks below the Grand Desolate Master level. But these general corpses were immortal. Even the defense of the Dragon Palace could not destroy those immortal general corpses. From what Emosher knew, it seemed that only the demon-suppressing orb could destroy those immortal general corpses. Of course, he had not tried the dragon-slaying saber, nor had he tried other methods. But no matter how strong the other methods were, it was still his personal ability. And if the entire continent was infected, and only the first hunting island was not infected in the end, countless general corpses would swarm towards the first hunting island. Then, no matter how strong his personal ability was, it would be impossible for him to stop the almost endless general corpses. Therefore, he had to sign in more demon-suppressing orbs. And, other than that, he had to think of other ways. Chapter 498. Emosher returned to Hunting Island number 1. Every day, he would sign in, and sign in again. He had 2 sign-in opportunities a day to sign in the demon-suppressing orb. Then, he would distribute these demon-suppressing orbs to the people in the base, telling them that they could only use them when they were attacked by the infected. At the same time, Mo was also constantly paying attention to the new developments of the zombie virus on the continent. Official news, June 1st. A new zombie virus appeared in 3 states. June 2nd. A new zombie virus appeared in the 4th state. June 5th. A new zombie virus appeared in the 5th state. June 10th. A new zombie virus appeared in 7 states. The new virus can be spread through the air, and the new zombies can't be killed. All citizens are advised to wear a gas mask and hide in a safe place as soon as possible when encountering the new zombie. Do not have any contact with the new zombie. June 12th. Some people had already escaped to other planets on spaceships. But resources were limited. At present, only those who passed the test of the new zombie virus and reached the level of a hunter or above could escape to other planets on spaceships. Mo looked at the shocking reports in these places. Looking at the map of the flaming beginning continent, at first, only a few states had a few red dots. Gradually, more and more red dots appeared in these places. Red dots appeared in other states one after another. He remembered a game he played when he was on Earth. Plague Incorporated. The changes in the map in front of him were very similar to the scene in Plague Incorporated. Plague Incorporated. In the end, the humans on Earth were almost extinct. And the map of the entire Earth turned blood red. Seeing this, Mo's mood was also very low. Although he was not a saint and did not have to grieve for the death of everyone. But if all the humans in this world died, even if he survived, there would be no meaning in living. In fact, he had thought about using the demon-suppressing orb to destroy all the zombies in the places where there were zombies when the virus first broke out. But the virus spread too quickly. And he could only sign in at most 2 demon-suppressing orbs a day. And the flaming beginning continent was too big. Even if he kept teleporting to these places, it would be too late to stop it. In the flaming beginning ancient sect, several elders in the sect used their powerful strength to trap the virus in an energy shield. But that was all. Most of their disciples had already left. Only the desolate hunters and above were left. They planned to send the disciples who were desolate hunters and above onto the spaceship and let them escape to other planets. At the very least, they wanted to preserve the bloodline of the ancient flame sect. However, the elders couldn't make such a decision. They had to ask the sect master to make a decision. Even after such a huge incident, the sect master still hadn't appeared. This was because the sect master had already said before his seclusion that this seclusion was related to whether or not he could break through to become a level 10 Grand Desolate Master. Unless the sky is falling, do not disturb him. But now, the entire Flaming Dawn continent was facing extinction. Wasn't this equivalent to the sky collapsing? A total of 10 elders arrived at the Universe Tower where the ancient flame sect leader was in seclusion. They pondered for a long time. The first elder turned his head and looked at the other elders. Finally, he raised his head and looked at the Universe Tower. He bowed deeply and said with a long voice, "The flame beginning continent is facing destruction, and so is the flame beginning ancient sect. Sect Master, please come out of seclusion and save the disciples of the Flame Dawn ancient sect." The other 9 elders also knelt down at the same time. They said in unison, "The flame beginning continent is facing destruction, and so is the Flame Dawn ancient sect. Sect Master, please come out of seclusion and save the disciples of the Flame Dawn ancient sect." After saying that, the 10 elders knelt on the ground again. The elders looked at each other. They didn't know what to do. In the end, the first elder knelt down again. He repeated it once more. The rest of the elders repeated the same thing. However, there was still no response from the Universe Tower. After a long time, the elders looked at each other. In the end, it was the first elder who knelt down again and spoke again. The rest of the elders followed the great elder's lead and bowed again, repeating their previous words. This time, as soon as they finished speaking, the door of the Universe Tower shattered with a loud bang. It was as if a train had crashed through from the inside. Gravel flew in all directions. The elders were all shocked. However, none of them dared to use their energy to block or dodge. They could only let the gravel hit their bodies. When the gravel stopped flying, the smoke and dust dissipated. A figure emerged from the Qiankun Tower. This figure wasn't the Flame Dawn ancient sect master. Instead, it was a lowly about 14 or 15 years old. She had 2 ponytails and was dressed in JK attire. She had a pair of big, watery eyes that could make people sink in. She had a cute face, and anyone who saw her would want to take a look at her. At this moment, she was looking at her surroundings with a pair of big, curious eyes like a curious baby. The 10 elders were all shocked when they saw this. Then, the first elder came to his senses and pointed at the lowly with his right hand. "Who are you? How dare you trespass into the forbidden area of the Flame Dawn ancient sect?" The lowly looked around and carefully identified the 10 elders. Then, she cursed angrily with a face full of anger. "Damn it, you old fogies. It's all because of you that I became like this. I'll stew you and feed you to the dogs." The faces of the 10 elders were filled with shock and anger. However, when they heard this, they all trembled. The first elder swallowed his saliva and asked tentatively. "Sect master?" The lowly cursed angrily. "Nonsense, if it's not me, who else can it be?" When the first elder heard this, he immediately knelt on the ground. His eyes were full of fear. The other elders also knelt on the ground at the same time. "Welcome back, sect master. Welcome back, sect master." The lowly pointed at the 10 elders who were kneeling on the ground and cursed. Come out, your sister. I was going to break through to a level 10 Grand Desolate Master and reach a higher realm. If I want to reach a higher realm, I have to use my consciousness to traverse space. When traversing space, my consciousness will be attached to the people in the other space. As long as I traverse space 81 times, I will be able to break through and reach a higher realm. I've already traversed space 79 times. I only need 2 more. Damn it, you guys messed up my traversing. Now, my body has traversed to another space, and my consciousness has brought this body back. Are you satisfied? When the elders heard this, they were all sweating profusely. How could such a thing happen? However, the actions of the person in front of them were undoubtedly their sect master. In his anger, the sect master looked at the sky. He sighed. Sigh, it's all my dead father's fault. Of all the names he could give me, he actually called me Luoli. Now, I'm really a lowly. Damn it. Chapter 499. The sect master of the ancient flame sect had always been like this. He would curse first. After cursing, he would think about how to solve the problem. The 10 elders knew that the sect master was like this, so when the sect master cursed, none of them made a sound. They all listened quietly. 5 minutes later, the sect master finished cursing, and the first elder spoke. Sect master, we have disturbed your breakthrough and caused you to become like this. We are all very guilty. No matter what you want to do with us, we won't dare to complain. But there is something urgent that needs to be solved. Sect Master Raleigh's mouth was dry from all the cursing. He directly spread his legs and sat on the steps in front of the Qiankun Tower. He said, if you have something to say it quickly. Once you are done, I will go back and find a way to get my original body back. The first elder couldn't help but twitch his eyes. Because when the sect master sat, the first elder could see the sect master's body from his position. He couldn't help but want to remind the sect master that he was exposed. But after thinking about it, he held back. He said, Sect master, there is a new zombie virus that is very powerful. Not only does it spread quickly through the air, but the virus can't be killed with the current methods of the flaming origin continent. It has a trend of becoming a pandemic. The major sects have already transferred their disciples above the desolate hunter realm to other planets. I've discussed with a few elders, and we've decided to transfer some of our disciples to other planets. But this is a serious matter, and we have to get the sect master's permission. That is why we have disturbed the sect master's breakthrough. Raleigh heard this and had a look of disdain. He cursed, "What are you elders doing? Our ancient flame sect is the #1 sect in the world, and we have a deep foundation. Can't you even deal with a small virus? Do you still need to escape to other planets? Don't you know that the Flaming Origin continent is the most suitable planet for us to live on and has the most resources?" The elders lowered their heads and didn't dare to answer. Only the first elder mustered the courage to speak. "We are incompetent. Sect Master, if you have a way to deal with the new zombie virus, please do it and save the disciples of the ancient flame sect from the abyss of suffering." Lori tossed the ponytail on his shoulder to the back and said, "It's just a small matter, yet you still need this sect master to personally take action. I'm so tired of being the sect master. Let's go, take me there." As he spoke, he stood up. However, when she stood up, her ponytail slid down her shoulders again. Lori impatiently flung him behind him and scolded, "That's right. F***CKU. When the elders saw this, they wanted to laugh but did not dare to. He could only forcefully hold it in. The first elder heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that the sect master had finally stood up. Finally, he didn't have to look up to see Fat too. Soon, they arrived before the light barrier with Luoli. Luoli saw that there were already more than 50 disciples within the light barrier. The faces of the disciples turned pale. There were thick dark circles around his eyes. All of them had green faces and fangs, looking very frightening. When they saw Luoli coming over, they all rushed towards him through the light shield. Although it was blocked by the light barrier, it still looked very scary. The first elder next to him explained, "They are all infected with the new zombie virus and can't be killed at all. No matter if it's physical, energy, or any other means, even if their heads are blown up, they can recover in a short time." When Luoli heard this, he flung his ponytail behind him and said, "F***CK, such a powerful virus? Let me try." As she spoke, a ball of fiery red energy condensed in her hands. She waved this energy out. This ball of energy entered the light barrier. As soon as it entered the light barrier, it exploded. The glaring red light made almost everyone present feel as if they were blinded in an instant. However, this explosion did not make any sound. It was like watching a star explode in the universe. It looked very powerful, but no sound could be heard. When the red light gradually faded, everyone's vision returned to normal. At this moment, when they looked inside the light barrier again, there were no longer any green-faced disciples with fangs. There was nothing there. When the first elders saw this, they were all shocked. They had tried all kinds of methods these days, but they couldn't do anything about the zombie virus. Now, the sect leader just casually waved a ball of energy and completely destroyed those zombies. What kind of strength did the sect leader have? Sect leader Luoli seemed to have seen through everyone's doubts. She waved her hand impatiently and said, "When you're lucky enough to be as strong as me, you'll naturally know. There's nothing to be surprised about. The most important thing now is to quickly summon all the disciples back. I went into seclusion and all of you killed all the disciples of my ancient flame sect. F***CK. When the first elders heard this, they nodded. Yes, sect leader. Next, Luoli used the energy to cleanse the entire ancient flame sect. This scene made everyone's eyes widen. The first elder was a level 6 Grand Desolate Master, but he could only use the energy barrier to cover a radius of a few kilometers. However, the sect leader used the energy to cleanse the entire ancient flame sect. One had to know that the mountain where the ancient flame sect was located on was at least 100 kilometers wide. This was the difference between them. Next, the disciples of the ancient flame sect received the news and returned to the ancient flame sect. When the rest of the people heard the news, they quickly gathered around the ancient flame sect. They weren't disciples of the ancient flame sect and couldn't go up the mountain. However, in the entire continent, only the sect leader of the ancient flame sect could eliminate the virus. Therefore, it would be safer for them to stay near the flame-beginning ancient sect than anywhere else. Gradually, the disciples of the other factions who were unable to ride a flying ship started to gather around the Flame Dawn ancient sect. In an instant, there were tens of millions of people within 100 kilometers of the ancient flame sect. Gradually, the news spread far and wide. Even many people from other prefectures rushed to the ancient flame sect when they heard the news. After hearing this news, Mo was also somewhat puzzled in his heart. How did the sect leader of the ancient flame sect kill the corpse general virus? However, it was still a good thing that there was someone who could kill the corpse general virus. However, the sect leader of the ancient flame sect and Mo were far from enough. The number of infected people on the continent was still increasing rapidly. The map of the continent was also turning red. Chapter 500. Mo could only shake his head and sigh helplessly when he saw the map gradually turning red. The virus was so aggressive that even he couldn't stop it. The only thing he could do was to protect the first hunting island. Of course, other than getting 2 demon-suppressing orbs every day, he didn't idle around. Although he had a lot of evolution points, it consumed 30 million evolution points every day. If he didn't have any income, it wouldn't be long before he used up all his points. Therefore, he still had to hunt these general corpses every day to obtain kill points and evolution points. On a mountain more than 200 kilometers away from the Mystic Moon sect. The sect leader of the Mystic Moon female sect led the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect to set up camp in this city. All the desolate hunters of the Mystic Moon sect had already left the flaming continent by flying ship. Originally, the sect leader of the Mystic Moon sect should also escape. However, she couldn't bear to see the 200,000 disciples of the Mystic Moon sect die in the flaming continent. Therefore, she and an elder led these disciples to avoid the general corpses and escape to this mountain. The general corpses seemed to have some kind of reaction to humans. They would always go to places where humans gathered. Now that the 200,000 disciples of the Mystic Moon sect had gathered, they would naturally attract a large number of general corpses. That night, when the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect were resting, they suddenly heard the roar of a general corpse at the foot of the mountain. They quickly prepared for battle. When they looked carefully, they found that there were about thousands of people running up the mountain. Behind them were tens of thousands of new zombies. They roared and chased after them. These people's combat power was very strong. As long as they turned around, they could take down a large number of new zombies. However, these zombies were almost immortal. The zombies that were taken down would quickly get up and continue to chase after them. These people could only run up the mountain. However, the path up the mountain had already been cut off by the sect leader of the Mystic Moon sect. Therefore, at this time, the mountain was surrounded by cliffs. Those people ran to the edge of the cliff and saw that there was no way to go. They all cursed. Damn it! Why is the path cut off? Damn it! Some of them had flying skateboards. However, they were only a few. The others' flying skateboards were basically damaged during the long flight. At this moment, someone saw someone on the opposite mountain. Moreover, these people were all wearing the clothes of the Mystic Moon female sect. He could not help exclaiming aloud, "Senior sisters of the Mystic Moon female sect, we are disciples of the ancient dragon sect, please save us." The sect leader of the Mystic Moon female sect snorted when she received the report. The ancient dragon sect treated our Mystic Moon female sect well on the surface, but who knows how many obstacles they have set for us in the dark. They only had themselves to blame for their actions today. Ignore it. As a result, the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect could only watch as the ancient dragon sect disciples were surrounded by the new zombies. Although they had been fighting and struggling for more than 20 minutes, they had all died on the opposite cliff in the end. When the new zombies saw the Mystic Moon female sect disciples, their eyes turned red and they kept roaring at them. There were even new types of zombies trying to jump over the cliff. But in the end, because the distance was too far, they fell into the bottomless abyss after jumping halfway. However, the intelligence of these new zombies wasn't bad. Half an hour later, they thought of a solution. They came to the bottom of the cliff and began to climb up. Although the cliff was almost perpendicular to the ground. But for the hunters, it was not particularly difficult to climb. Similarly, it was not a problem for the new zombies with outstanding jumping ability. On the cliff, the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect saw this scene and quickly reported it to the sect leader. "Sect leader, what should we do?" The sect leader narrowed her eyes and slowly opened them. She was only putting up a final struggle with these 200,000 disciples. The virus was very aggressive. Even if she was here, it would only delay them for a few days. She had thought of bringing these disciples to the Ancient Flame sect. She heard that the sect leader of the Ancient Flame sect had come out of seclusion and could kill zombies. But this place was too far away from the Ancient Flame sect. How much danger would they have to go through? If they really went to the Ancient Flame sect, there would only be a few disciples left. But even if it was futile, she could not bear to not save them. But now, they were at the end of their rope. Many of the flying skateboards were damaged. One had to know that these disciples had lost their flying devices and could not fly at all. She originally thought that by leaving the crowd and bringing these disciples to this mountain, they would be able to last for a while. But she did not expect the Ancient Dragon sect to attract zombies again. What should she do next? She sat there cross-legged and seemed to be calm. But she was already a little anxious. Because she could not think of any solution at the moment. She could kill her way out, but there were too many disciples. It was impossible for all of them to escape. Especially the zombies at the foot of the mountain. There were many of them. And the zombies could not be killed at all. So it seemed that she could not bring these disciples to break out of the encirclement. The surrounding disciples looked at the sect leader at this moment. They were all waiting for the sect leader to answer. But the elder next to her knew that tonight was going to be a difficult night. At this moment, another disciple came to report. "Sect leader, these new zombies are already halfway up." The sect master sighed slightly. Only then did he manage to pull himself together and said, "Prepare for battle. We will kill our way out." "Yes." The disciples yelled at the top of their lungs. They seemed to be full of vigor. But only they knew that tonight was really going to be over. Along the way, the sect leader had helped them solve too many difficulties. But tonight, even the sect leader would not be able to bring them out of danger. At this moment, a few disciples looked at each other. Suddenly, they knelt in front of the sect leader. "Sect leader, please forgive me for offending you. We will not accept the battle." Hearing that, the sect leader looked at that disciple. "Why not?" Those disciples looked at each other. One of them said, "Sect leader, we can't escape tonight. But you and the third elder have the ability and strength to leave. Please leave with the third elder first." When the other female disciples heard that, they came to their senses and knelt down together. "Sect leader, please leave with the third elder. Sect leader, please leave with the third elder." Hearing that, the sect leader slowly stood up. She said, "As the sect leader, if the Mystic Moon sect wants to be destroyed, I should die first." When the female disciples heard that, they all choked with sobs. At this moment, a figure appeared in the sky not far away from them without any warning. Chapter 501. Just as the Mystic Moon female sect disciples were in a desperate situation. In the dark night sky, a figure suddenly appeared without any warning. Although it was night time, these Mystic Moon female sect disciples were not ordinary people. They were completely capable of seeing in the dark, but the things they saw were slightly darker than usual. When they saw Immortal, they were stunned. This was because they felt that this face was slightly familiar. Have they seen him before? They seemed to have. However, he couldn't remember where he had seen it. Soon, a disciple remembered, he is Island Master Mo. Island Master Mo. It really is Island Master Mo. What is he doing here? They did not think that Island Master Mo was here to save them. Firstly, Island Master Mo was not related to them and had no obligation to ask them for help. Secondly, from past reviews, even though Island Master Mo wasn't an extremely evil person, he definitely wasn't a good person either. Naturally, he would not take such a huge risk to save them in the middle of the night. When the Mystic Moon female sect leader saw Mo Sure, it was as though she saw the last trace of hope. She hurriedly stood up and clasped her fists towards Mo Sure and said, "Island Master Mo, the Mystic Moon female sect has met with a great calamity. Please save us. If Island Master Mo needs us in the future, the Mystic Moon female sect will not refuse." Mo Sure did not say anything and only nodded. He had a good impression of this Mystic Moon female sect leader. Moreover, he originally came here to collect evolution points and slaughter points. With so many general corpses here, it was the best opportunity to collect evolution points and slaughter points. At this moment, his body slowly descended towards the bottom of the cliff. On the cliff, the general corpses that were climbing up saw this human in front of them and all let out excited roars. They continuously jumped towards Mo Sure and tried to push Mo Sure down. However, with a single thought from Mo Sure, these general corpses were unable to get close to him and all fell from the sky. On the cliff, when the Mystic Moon female sect disciples saw the zombies pouncing towards Mo Sure, their hearts tightened. Even though they knew that with Island Master Mo's strength, it would be very difficult for these new zombies to harm him. However, seeing that Mo Sure didn't use any energy to separate the zombies, they were naturally nervous. However, when they saw that none of the zombies were able to get close to Mo Sure, they came to a realization. Psychic Master. He must be a Psyche Master. No wonder Island Master Mo is so powerful. He is actually a Psyche Master. However, their sect master quickly noticed that something was amiss. She slowly shook her head, and her tone was somewhat surprised. "No, he's not a psychic master, but a spiritual psychic master." The disciples of the Mystic Moon sect were stunned when they heard this. Immediately, he exclaimed in surprise, "Spiritual psychic." They had seen spiritual psyche masters before. Mystic Moon female sect once had 5 spiritual psyche masters. In order to reach the level of a spiritual reader, one would need to spend a lot of energy and time, far more than an ordinary spiritual master or desolate hunter. Therefore, as long as one was a spiritual reader, it was impossible for them to cultivate anything else. However, according to what they knew, this Island Master Mo was originally an extremely powerful Grand Desolate Master. Summoner again. Now, he was also a spiritual reader. Is there anything you don't know? However, some disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect started to worry. But why is he going down? There are thousands of new types of zombies below. Is he confident if he goes down? The Mystic Moon female sect master, Qian Xianyue, shook her head slightly. How can the likes of you guess the thoughts of a character like Island Master Mo? Those disciples quickly lowered their heads and kept quiet, not daring to say another word. At this moment, Mo Sure was slowly descending from the sky. When he was 100 meters away from the ground, the general zombies on the ground had already stretched their necks hungrily. They were even drooling from the corners of their mouths. When he descended a little further, these general zombies suddenly jumped into the air like a group of fleas that were suddenly hung out to dry. However, once they got close to Mo Sure only needed to move his dragon psyche slightly. These general zombies fell down one after another. Soon, Mo Sure landed in the air, only 50 meters above the ground. At this moment, more general zombies pounced on Mo Sure. Looking down from the sky, one could see that the ground was filled with black general zombies. No matter who it was, if they were in such a situation, they would only feel despair. Above the cliff, Qian Xianyue stared at Mo Sure. She was not worried for Mo Sure, but wanted to see how the continent's strongest person was like. At this moment, a saber appeared in Mo Sure's right hand. This saber looked very ordinary. It had a black body and the handle was wrapped with a black coarse cloth. It looked like a large butcher's knife. Then, a fiery red energy poured into the butcher's knife from Mo Sure's right arm. After a short while, more than half of the energy in his body had been poured into the dragon-slaying saber. The originally ordinary dragon Salyer, at this moment, was actually shining brightly. In the next moment, Mo Sure swept the dragon-slaying saber with his right hand. Then, with a thought, he kept the dragon-slaying saber in his system backpack. Above the cliff, the Mystic Moon female sect disciples were all puzzled when they saw this scene. What is Island Master Mo doing? Why did Island Master Mo put the saber away? It's very strange. Qian Xianyue was also slightly surprised when she saw this scene. What she saw was exactly the same as what the female disciples saw. She had no idea what Immortal was doing. The only difference between her and the other female disciples was that she could faintly feel that Immortal's saber strike wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface. Just as the female disciples were puzzled. In the next moment, the black mass of general corpses below the cliff suddenly disappeared without a sign. It was so clean that not a single gap was left. Everyone was extremely surprised. Why did they suddenly disappear? Could it be that Island Master Mo's attack just now? Thinking of this, all the female disciples were inexplicably surprised. In their eyes, Island Master Mo had just casually swung the saber. After that, he put the saber away. He did not even use any energy. The thousands of new zombies disappeared just like that. Just as they were surprised, the ground suddenly trembled. Oh no, an earthquake! Someone cried out. But at this moment, the sect leader of the Mystic Moon female sect shook her head and said, "No, it's Island Master Mo." Before she finished speaking, the shaking under her feet became even more intense. In the next moment, rumble, the entire mountain began to collapse. The sky collapsed and the earth caved in. The entire mountain with a radius of hundreds of kilometers collapsed with a loud bang. It was like the end of the world. At this moment, all the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect had the same thought that shocked them to the extreme. It was Island Master Mo who had cut off this mountain with a single slash. Chapter 502. The mountain was more than 100 kilometers long from east to west and 30 kilometers wide from north to south. But it was cut in half by Wang Yi. What kind of terrifying destructive power was that? Most importantly, they did not see the energy of that slash. His movements were like that of an ordinary person, casually swinging a knife. And it caused such terrifying destruction. What kind of strength was that? Although many of the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect had lost their flying skateboards. They could not fly in the air. But they could still slowly float down from the sky. In the smoke and dust from the collapse of the mountain, they slowly floated down to the ground. After a full 15 minutes, only the smoke and dust could be seen. The disciples of the Mystic Moon sect slowly landed among the large and small stones on the ground. Qian Xianyue immediately floated down to Mo Shi and clasped her fists to Mo Shi. She said, "Thank you for saving us, Mr. Mo. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have survived today." Mo Shi used his dragon will to investigate. There were many disciples of the Mystic Moon sect within the range of his dragon will. He shook his head slightly and said, "You won't be able to go far with them." Qian Xianyue smiled bitterly and said, "I know, but I really can't bear to leave them behind." Mo Shi pondered for a while and said, "Although my hunting island number 1 is not absolutely safe, it should not be an issue at all to fend off those general corpses." Qian Xianyue was overjoyed when she heard this. She hurriedly bowed to Mo Shi. "Island Master Mo, I thank you for your kindness on behalf of the hundreds of thousands of disciples behind me." Mo Shi shook his head slightly and said, "No need to say more. Saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda. I'll give you half an hour to rest. After half an hour, follow me to the first hunting island." In fact, Mo Shi had his own considerations when he was willing to take in the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect. There were only about 50,000 people on the first hunting island. Compared to the huge flaming land, it was still a small force. He could not always guard the first hunting island. Moreover, if the corpse virus wasn't dealt with properly, the entire flaming origin continent might be infected. At that time, the first hunting island would have to face the trillions of general corpses of the flaming dawn continent. Then how could he endure it? The hundreds of thousands of disciples from the Mystic Moon female sect would make up for the lack of manpower on hunting island number 1. 90% of the people who had followed Emosure to the Flaming Dawn continent were men. Women had become a rare species on Hunting Island 1. They were willing to trust Emosure and follow Emosure to Hunting Island 1. Now that there was an opportunity for them to find wives, Emosure naturally wouldn't let it go. Thus, in the next few days, Emosure led the hundreds of thousands of female disciples and began to migrate. 5 days later, they returned to Hunting Island 1. The disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect saw that Hunting Island number 1 was surrounded by blood-red infected creatures. However, the center was full of vitality. They were all very surprised. The people on Hunting Island number 1 were overjoyed at the arrival of the Mystic Moon female sect disciples. It's too beautiful. Look at that one, I like that one. They're like fairies descending from the heavens. Are you kidding? They're the Mystic Moon female sect, the third largest sect on the Flaming Dawn continent. Mr. Mo is really amazing. He even brought all the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect to Hunting Island 1. Let's not talk about other things. In short, we bachelors have a way to survive now. Thank you, Mr. Mo. Due to the sudden arrival of hundreds of thousands of people, Hunting Island 1 was not big enough. Emosure asked Guo Jutao to start expanding the living area on Hunting Island 1. The female disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect also came to help. Although they were all women, they were not inferior to men when it came to work. This was probably because the Mystic Moon female sect was made up of only female disciples. All the work had to be done by these women, which was why they were able to train so well. Just as the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect were settled in, Emosure received a system notification in his mind. The number of people in the Dragon Palace has exceeded 100,000. It can be upgraded by 1 level. Do you want to upgrade now? Emosure was quite surprised. He had been hesitating whether to use the evolution points in his hand to upgrade the Dragon Palace. However, he had to use his current evolution points to sign in the demon-suppressing orb. This was the only way he could think of to break the siege of the General Corpse. Therefore, he did not upgrade the Dragon Palace. He did not expect that the Dragon Palace could be upgraded after bringing back so many disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect. What was there to hesitate about? Upgrade. Emosure said. The system's voice immediately sounded. This upgrade does not require evolution points, but it will take 72 hours. Therefore, Emosure did not leave Hunting Island 1 for the next 72 hours. In this world, it was possible to encounter infected general corpses everywhere. Therefore, it was better to be careful. 3 days later, just as Emosure and Emosure had lunch, the system notification sounded in his mind. Dragon Palace successfully upgraded. Emosure quickly checked the Dragon Palace's attributes. Name, Dragon Palace, Level, 5, Members, 231,103, Defense Level, able to resist attacks below Level 10 Desolate Master, including Level 10 Desolate Master, Refining Platforms, 10, Other Attributes, click to expand. Emosure clicked to expand the other attributes and found that there were not many changes to them. Only the addition of 1,000 virtual sentry towers. Emosure could place these 1,000 virtual sentry towers within a 10,000-kilometer radius around the Dragon Palace. This way, Emosure would be able to see any changes within a 10,000-kilometer radius. The biggest change was the defense level and refining platforms that were displayed on the surface. The defense level was maxed out. In other words, even the strongest existence in the Flaming Origin continent would not be able to break through the defense of Hunting Island 1. Even the current Emosure would not be able to break through it. The defense level was not weak at all. Another change was that the number of refining platforms had increased to 10. 10 desolate refining platforms meant that 10 desolate masters could be refined. In 3 months, he would be able to produce 100 grand desolate masters. It was exciting just thinking about it. When the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect saw how easy it was to create desolate masters on Hunting Island 1, they felt that their worldview was shattered. From what they knew, every grand desolate master had lived for hundreds of years. First, they had to have absolute talent. Then, they had to train hard and take risks to gain experience in various places. They also needed the support of absolute luck before they could become a Grand Desolate Master. However, this number 1 hunting island had produced 10 Grand Desolate Masters in 10 days. This was too much of a bug. Xian Xianyue originally thought that she would take these female disciples to other planets when she had the chance in the future. But when she saw this bug-like refining platform, she finally gave up on this idea. Chapter 503. Xian Xianyue thought, let these female disciples stay here. Perhaps in the near future, many of them would have a chance to become Grand Desolate Masters. As their sect leader, she was happy for them. Therefore, she did not plan to leave immediately. Instead, she contacted the elders in the sect and asked them to bring the Desolate Hunters to other planets to develop. If there was a chance in the future, she would ask the elders to bring the disciples back. Thinking of the Desolate Hunter disciples, before they left, they were the elites of the sect. But by the time they returned, many of the Desolate Hunter disciples in the sect might have become Grand Desolate Masters. I don't know how they should feel. In the following days, Mo Shi went out every day to kill the general corpses. His evolution points and kill points were also increasing rapidly. Finally, one day. In his mind, the system's familiar voice sounded, frowny face kill points have reached 10 billion. Can be upgraded. Mo Shi said in his mind without hesitation, upgrade. This upgrade will take 48 hours. Mo Shi immediately returned to the first hunting island. He stayed on the first hunting island for 2 days. The system's voice sounded again, frowny face upgrade successful. At the same time, Mo Shi's attributes appeared in his mind, frowny face name, Mo Shi, level 10 Desolate Hunter, level 10 Long Nian Shi. Mo Shi saw it and could not help but feel excited. One more level and he would become a Grand Desolate Master. There were so many general corpses on the continent. If he kept killing them, he would be able to get enough kill points. According to his previous experience, another upgrade would require 100 billion kill points. Killing 10 general corpses would give him 1 kill point. Then he would have to kill 1 trillion general corpses. There were only 3 trillion humans in the entire Flaming Land. If he really wanted to get so many kill points, it would mean that at least 1/3 of the Flaming Land's population had become general corpses. Mo Shi shook his head. This would not do. He asked in his mind, system, is there no other way to upgrade? If it was in the past, the system would basically remain silent when faced with such a problem. Because the system would usually give the best solution. No other choice would be better than the system's solution. But this time, Mo Shi had not expected it. When he asked this question, the system replied instantly, frowny face, there are still 3 options. Mo Shi was slightly taken aback. Then, he hurriedly said, tell me quickly. The system's voice sounded, frowny face 1. Use all of your current evolution points to upgrade Dragon Palace by 1 level. He could increase the number of refining stations to 100. Each desolate refining platform required 10 days to refine a Grand Desolate Master. As long as the host spends 10 days to refine 100 Grand Desolate Masters, the host will automatically level up. From there, you will be promoted to a Grand Desolate Master. Mo Shi's eyes lit up. That was a good idea. However, he quickly rejected this plan. All of his current evolution points still need to be used to sign in the Demon Suppressing Orb. Currently, the Demon Suppressing Orb was the only thing that could be used by others to deal with corpse generals. What about the second one? Mo Shi asked. The system's voice sounded again, frowny face 2. With the current speed of the Desolate refining platform, it will be able to refine 100 Grand Desolate Masters in 3 months. At that time, the host will automatically level up. Mo Shi nodded his head, yes, this is okay. In other words, even if Mo Shi didn't do anything in these 3 months. After 3 months, he would also level up. At that time, he would directly become a Grand Desolate Master. Other Grand Desolate Masters had to go through untold hardships and hundreds of years to reach the Grand Desolate Master realm. Even if he didn't do anything and just ate, drank, played, and slept, he would still reach the Grand Desolate Master realm in 3 months. If other Grand Desolate Masters knew about this, they would vomit blood. Of course, compared to the Grand Desolate Masters refined by the Desolate Refining Platform, Emosher's speed was a lot slower. However, the Grand Desolate Masters refined by the Desolate Refining Platform only had the fighting strength of normal Grand Desolate Masters. Although Emosher was only a level 10 Desolate Master, his fighting strength was extremely powerful. He could already challenge level 5 to 6 Grand Desolate Masters. This didn't include the Sea Dragon clones bonus. Thus, he didn't envy them. What about the third one? Emosher asked. The system replied frowny face 3. Kill a living giant dragon and devour its blood. You can advance to the Grand Desolate Master realm, which is the Giant Dragon realm. When Emosher heard this, he was a little speechless. Are there other giant dragons in this world? The system replied frowny face, the universe is big, there are all kinds of strange things. Emosher's eyes lit up and he asked, so, there are really places in the universe where giant dragons live? This time, the system didn't reply instantly. It directly fell into silence. However, Emosher had already tasted something from the system's words. The system definitely wasn't randomly giving out such a mission. In that case, it shouldn't take too long for him to see a real giant dragon. The second giant dragon other than himself. Of course, it could also be many giant dragons. And from the looks of it, the system seemed to be deliberately pushing him to the opposite side of the giant dragons. The rope given was called the Dragon Binding Rope, and the saber given was called the Dragon Slaying Saber. Even the evolution had evolved into a bloodthirsty demon dragon. If the other giant dragons knew about it, they might try every means to hunt him down. Thinking of this, Emosher seemed to have seen what kind of battle he would face in the near future. Thinking of this, he felt that he had to increase his strength as soon as possible. Just reaching the peak of the flaming beginning continent was far from enough. He had to increase his combat strength to a higher level before he met those giant dragons. Therefore, in the next few days, Emosher didn't wait quietly for more than 3 months to pass. Instead, he kept going outside and slaughtering those general corpses. And now, his methods were even more ruthless and he slaughtered faster. His evolution points were also constantly rising. Gradually, time passed. In more than 3 months, Emosher's kill points had reached more than 1 billion. Obviously, he was still far from reaching 100 billion. However, in these 3 months, he had signed in more than 200 demon-suppressing orbs. With so many demon-suppressing orbs, he felt a little more relaxed. At the same time, on this day, the 100th Grand Desolate Master was refined on the Desolate Refining Platform. In Emosher's mind, a system notification suddenly sounded frowny face after refining 100 Grand Desolate Masters, the host will automatically level up by 1 level. In the next moment, Emosher felt a huge amount of energy suddenly surging through his meridians without any warning. Every cell in his body seemed to have come alive in an instant. Every muscle in his body felt like it was about to be torn apart. Every vein in his body seemed to be about to burst. However, this feeling only lasted for less than 5 minutes. Then, his entire body suddenly felt relaxed. Chapter 504. Compared to other level 10 Desolate Hunters who needed decades to become a Grand Desolate Master, Wang Yi's process was much simpler. The process of his cells coming to life, his muscles tearing, and his meridians bursting only lasted for less than 5 minutes. Soon, he felt his body relax. It was as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. In his mind, the system's voice also sounded, promotion successful. Emosher checked his status. Name, Emosher level 1 Grand Desolate Master, rank 1 Evolved Giant Dragon, level 10 Long Nianshur ability, click to expand, phew, Emosher let out a long breath. He had finally become a Grand Desolate Master. At the same time, according to the Giant Dragon's power system, he had reached rank 1 Evolved Giant Dragon. The dragon race's ranks were, Giant Dragon, Evolved Giant Dragon, Super Evolved Giant Dragon, Ancient Giant Dragon, Immemorial Giant Dragon, and so on. Mo Shi's current level of Evolved Giant Dragon could only be considered as a newbie. Mo Shi was already an invincible existence in the Flaming Land. This promotion had raised his strength to another level. Of course, this was still not enough. Since the system wanted to train him to become a dragon slayer, he had to continue to increase his strength. Now that he had become a Grand Desolate Master, he needed 1 trillion kill points for every level up. Even if all the people in the Flaming Land turned into general corpses and he killed them all, it would not be enough for him to level up. Thus, there were only 2 methods left. One was to use all his evolution points to level up the Dragon Palace and double the number of refining tables. However, this was not a consideration for now. The last method was to slay a dragon. According to the system, as long as he killed a giant dragon, he could level up to a Grand Desolate Master. Now that he was a Grand Desolate Master, he would need to kill at least 10 giant dragons. In the Flaming Land, there was not a single giant dragon other than himself. Where would he find 10 giant dragons? The system's voice quickly sounded, "You only need to kill 1 giant dragon to level up." Mo Shi was surprised. "Oh. Why?" The system replied, "The host has not killed a real giant dragon, so killing a giant dragon will level up. Consider it a reward for the host." Mo Shi nodded. "Yes, that's a good idea. But where can I find a dragon?" The system fell into silence once again. Mo Shi shook his head. Once the system remained silent, there was nothing he could do. It seemed that he could only fumble around on his own. For the next 2 months, Hunting Island 1 was peaceful. Every 10 days, the number 1 Hunting Island would produce 10 Grand Desolate Masters. Outside of Hunting Island number 1, the entire continent was not peaceful. The Corpse General had already taken over more and more areas. Almost half of the humans on the Flaming Continent had been infected. In the early stages of the zombie infection, many people had the mentality that the fewer people there were, the safer it would be. Just like a zombie infection, once a zombie got into a densely populated city, the whole city would be in an uproar. If a zombie was thrown into a village with only 20 to 30 families, it was very likely that only the village would be infected. Little did they know that this was equivalent to being surrounded by the commander corpses and then being defeated one by one. By now, people had also realized this. They started huddling together for warmth. At the same time, some cultivators with special attributes such as fire and ice did not die after being infected. Instead, their abilities were greatly improved. After their strength increased, their abilities became the bane of the Corpse General virus. In theory, the Corpse General virus could not be killed. However, cultivators with ice attribute could use their ice attribute energy to freeze the virus. The frozen virus would not be able to break free in a short period of time. As for cultivators with fire attribute, as long as they could raise the temperature of their fire attribute energy to a certain degree, they could directly vaporize the virus. There were also cultivators with lightning attribute energy. Their lightning attribute energy was extremely explosive and destructive. They could vaporize the Corpse General virus with just one blow. There were also cultivators with poison attribute energy. After their energy was strengthened, not only would they be immune to the Corpse General virus, the poison attribute energy in their bodies would also have a strong suppressive effect on the Corpse General virus. Therefore, when almost all the desolate hunters had fled, there were some heroes who specialized in hunting down the Corpse General virus. Of course, such heroes were very few in number. Therefore, they had a very high status in the hearts of the people. In many cities, the people used these heroes as their leaders to set up defensive lines to defend against the Corpse General virus. As a result, many bases of various sizes gradually formed on the Flaming Continent. When Mo Shi saw these bases, he could not help but shake his head. It turned out that when he came to the Flaming Continent from Earth, he had jumped from a small fire pit into an even bigger one. Mo Shi had used his draconic will to briefly scan a few bases. The bodies of the leaders of these bases had been strengthened by the Corpse General virus. Their strength had reached the level of a grand desolate master. However, this was clearly far from enough. There were more and more corpse general virus outside the bases, and the resources in their bases were decreasing. If they wanted to survive, they had to go out frequently to search for resources. This was unavoidable. After more than 2 months, there were more than 1,500 bases on the flaming continent. With so many bases, there were naturally more than 1,500 grand desolate masters with special abilities. It was also at this time that the corpse general virus began to gather and launch a large-scale attack on the human bases. At first, the people were not prepared, and the corpse general virus easily broke through more than 100 bases. After that, the people began to strengthen their defenses and defend these bases. However, this was only the beginning. Because the corpse general virus would only increase, and with these 1,400 experts, the corpse general virus could not kill as fast as the corpse general virus could infect them. Among so many experts, apart from Mo. The strongest was the sect master of the ancient flame sect, Lori. Mo. had been killing corpse general virus far away from the bases, so no one knew how strong he was. As a result, Lori seemed to have become the strongest person on the continent. With the ancient flame sect as the base, the radius of the base was more than 100 kilometers. Within this range, the corpse general virus did not dare to show its head. If it did, it would be destroyed by Lori. Lori was in the limelight on the entire flaming continent. Below the Sea Heart Waterfall on East End Island. Below the Sea Heart Waterfall, there was a huge pool with a radius of 50 kilometers. The seawater from the surrounding waterfalls all gathered in this huge pool. No one knew where the seawater from the surrounding waterfalls went after gathering in this pool. The pool was dark and deep, like a huge black eye gazing at the sky from the bottom of the sea. On this day, at a certain moment, 5 meters above the pool, the air suddenly distorted. Chapter 505. Sea Heart Waterfall, 5 meters above the deep pool. The space suddenly distorted. Then, a huge figure suddenly appeared. This huge figure was about 1,000 meters long. It had a pair of wings on its back. Its long tail was also more than 3 meters long. Its body was covered in black scales. There were ferocious spikes on its head. It was a giant dragon. This giant dragon's wings flapped slightly. Its figure instantly disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already 5,000 meters above the Sea Heart Waterfall. It lowered its head and looked down at the entire sea. Its pitch-black dragon eyes kept turning. Just a few seconds later, its wings flapped again. In the next moment, its figure had already disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already more than 1,000 kilometers away. Its wings flapped again. It reappeared more than 1,000 kilometers to the east. Just like that, it flapped its wings a few times and soon explored the area within 1,000 kilometers of the Sea Heart Waterfall. Finally, its figure stopped in the sky above East Pole Island. At the same time, a voice sounded in this giant dragon's right ear. "Kongjiu, have we arrived?" The dragon called Empty Nine chuckled and spoke in a human voice, "That's right. We're here." The voice sounded in its right ear again. "Let's see how the creatures there are. We've been away for tens of thousands of years. They must have grown and are not as weak as before." The giant dragon called Kongjiu smiled and said, "Then I'll test them." The voice in its right ear said, "Just test them. Don't kill them randomly. Every living thing here had a number. If you kill too many, it'll be troublesome if the higher-ups find out." Kongjiu chuckled and said, "Don't worry. I know what I'm doing." East Pole Island had already built a base called East Pole Base. The East Pole Island Lord did not escape from the flame-beginning continent with the others. Instead, he had been protecting the people on the island. No one would have thought that the East Pole Island Lord, who had always been extremely strict, would live and die with the islanders in this moment of life and death. However, he was unfortunately infected with the corpse general virus in a battle with a general corpse. However, not only did the corpse general virus not turn him into a general corpse, but it also greatly strengthened his body. As a result, his strength had soared to level 8 Grand Desolate Master. Moreover, his body had also evolved to a certain extent. The fire attribute energy in his body could vaporize the corpse virus in a short period of time. Since then, he had led the islanders to build the East Pole base here. At this moment, the people in the East Pole base were busy building the base. When someone inadvertently raised his head to look at the sky, he saw a huge figure slowly flapping its wings and floating in the sky. And this huge figure was exactly the same as the giant dragon recorded in legends, ancient murals, and ancient books. The man's eyes widened in shock. His mouth opened slightly. The person next to him noticed this person's strange behavior and followed his gaze. With one look, his eyes widened and his mouth opened slightly. After a while, his Adam's apple moved with difficulty. His lips moved. He wanted to make a sound. However, he realized that his throat was a little dry. His Adam's apple squirmed again with difficulty before he spoke, "I'm sorry." Giant dragon. When the others heard his voice, they all looked up at the sky. With one look, everyone was incomparably shocked. Giant dragon. It's really a giant dragon. This is a real giant dragon. Is it an illusion? It's impossible. Everyone is hallucinating. This is a real giant dragon. Amidst the shocked cries, everyone prostrated themselves on the ground. In the culture of the Flaming Land, almost every race had a giant dragon as their totem. Giant dragons were the most powerful and mysterious creatures in the universe. Tens of thousands of years ago, there were many giant dragons on this continent. However, for some reason, all the giant dragons disappeared. Some said that a disaster fell from the sky and caused the giant dragons to go extinct. Some said that the giant dragons could not adapt to the changes in the environment. Some said that the giant dragons went to other planets. Regardless of which theory it was, not a single giant dragon had appeared in the Flaming Land for tens of thousands of years. And now, a living giant dragon had appeared in front of them. How could they not be shocked? How could they not prostrate themselves in worship? The East Pole Island Lord heard the commotion and also came to the courtyard. When he saw the huge figure that was more than 1,000 meters long in the sky, his entire body seemed to tremble. Giant dragon. This was a real giant dragon. Even someone as powerful as him had the urge to kneel down and worship it. At this moment, the giant dragon that was slowly flapping its wings in the sky suddenly retracted its wings. It dove toward the ground. In almost 3 seconds, it dove to the ground from a height of more than 10,000 meters. A pair of front claws clawed toward the ground. Rumble. Its pair of huge claws drew a huge ravine that was more than 1,000 meters long and 100 meters wide on the ground. The hundreds of humans in the ravine were instantly turned into hundreds of corpses under its sharp claws. They were thrown far away. Then, its giant tail, which was hundreds of meters long, swept across the area. Rumble. One after another, the buildings collapsed to the ground. Kacha, one by one, the trees were snapped. Ah! The humans screamed in agony. But this time, hundreds of humans were directly sent to the Yellow Springs. The 200,000 humans who were prostrating on the ground were all dumbfounded. They had always been in awe of giant dragons. After this giant dragon appeared, they immediately prostrated themselves in worship. Why was the giant dragon doing this to them? In their panic, they fled in all directions. However, the speed at which they fled was far slower than the speed at which the giant dragon slaughtered them. Every time the giant dragon's tail swept across, at least 100 people would be smashed into meat paste. This scene was even more terrifying than any monster movie. When the East Pole Island Master saw this, he was also terrified at first. Like these humans, he did not know why the giant dragon would suddenly attack these humans. But soon, the fear in his heart was replaced by anger. These humans under his command worshipped the giant dragon so much. Even in their hearts, they did not dare to disobey the giant dragon in the slightest. Some even offered incense to the giant dragon and prayed to it every day. They never imagined that the giant dragon that appeared out of nowhere would treat them like this. In his anger, a fiery red spear condensed in his right hand. This fiery red spear seemed to be condensed from magma. Holding the spear in his right hand, he roared, "Evil dragon, die." As he spoke, he threw the spear in his right hand at the giant dragon. Chapter 506. The magma spear in the East Pole Island Master's hand streaked across a distance of 5,000 meters. Due to the high temperature, the air where the spear streaked across seemed to have been distorted. In almost an instant, the magma spear hit Sherlong's chest. Ding! When the magma spear hit the huge dragon's chest, it was unable to pierce through its scales. Instead, the magma spear broke into 3 pieces after a few cracking sounds. The East Pole Island Master's expression immediately turned extremely grave. One must know that he had already reached the level of a level 8 Grand Desolate Master. Furthermore, due to the strengthening of his body by the Corpse General virus, his strength had far surpassed the previous level 8 Grand Desolate Master. According to his estimation, he should be about the same as the previous level 10 Grand Desolate Master. In the end, the magma spear he condensed did not even manage to break through the scales of this huge dragon. However, even so, he could not watch as the people in the base were wantonly massacred by this huge dragon. With a roar, he bent his legs. He stomped on the ground. The next moment, his body soared into the sky like a rocket. At the place where he was previously standing, a ring of fiery red energy spread out in all directions. When he reached an altitude of 10,000 meters, a pair of flaming wings condensed on his back. When the huge dragon saw this scene, it spoke in human language. "Kaka, interesting." The energy in the East Pole Island Master's body began to surge out of his body. Soon, his entire body was covered in flames. Then, he roared, "Evil dragon, die." He pushed both his palms toward the evil dragon. As he pushed both his palms forward, all the flames on his body blasted toward the alternative dragon. It was as if a sea of flames had covered the sky and covered the earth. It actually enveloped the 1,000-meter-long evil dragon within it. It was very difficult to imagine how a human could release such a large sea of flames. This situation continued for 5 minutes. When the humans on the ground who were fleeing in panic saw this scene, they all heaved a sigh of relief. However, after 5 minutes, the sigh of relief that they had just heaved a sigh of relief became tense again. That was because the East Pole Island Master's high-intensity flames were slowly retracted, and the sea of flames in the sky gradually disappeared. Only then did they realize that the huge dragon was actually unscathed. It was still flapping its wings slightly as it floated there quietly. Its pair of abyss-like dragon eyes revealed a hint of blood-sucking. Then, a human voice came from his throat. However, this voice was hoarser than a human's. It sounded like someone was sawing wood. "It's my turn." As it spoke, the giant dragon opened its huge mouth. Boom! A burst of flames immediately shot toward the East Pole Island Master. Although this sea of flames was not as large as the one released by the East Pole Island Master earlier, it was still far more powerful. However, the East Pole Island Master was still able to sense that the flames contained an extremely dangerous sensation. He hurriedly retreated. At the same time, he covered his entire body with fiery red energy. In the next moment, he was engulfed by the flames. When the flames spewed out by the dragon disappeared, the East Pole Island Master had long been burned to a crisp. Falling from the sky. Bang! He landed on the grass. His body was still emitting thick smoke. Several of his subordinates hurried over. Under their probing, the East Pole Island Master no longer had any signs of life. "Island Master is dead." One of them exclaimed. "Island Master is dead. Island Master is dead." Many people nearby screamed out in horror. Since the outbreak of the zombie virus in the apocalypse, the East Pole Island Master had been protecting their safety. He led them to build a base and led them to repel the attacks of the zombie soldiers again and again. In their hearts, the island master was their hero. The island master was their savior. But now, the island master was actually killed by this evil dragon. The flames of anger in their hearts rose. However, in the face of such a huge mysterious creature, a totem that they had always worshipped, they could not summon the slightest thought of fighting back. In the sky, the evil dragon killed the East Pole Island master. It let out a guffaw of laughter. Keek keek keek, how dare a mere low-level creature make an enemy out of a giant dragon? Then, it opened its mouth again and spewed flames toward the ground. Boom! The fire began to burn on the East Pole Island. The more than 200,000 people on the East Pole Island were screaming and rolling in pain in the fire. The evil dragon in the sky let out a guffaw of laughter. It was like a child pouring boiling water into a colony of ants. In the end, the 200,000 people on the island were all burned to a crisp. No one was spared. Decades later, someone set foot on the island. The burned people could be seen everywhere. Some were curled up into balls. Some were rushing toward the sea. Some were carrying children. The situation was extremely horrifying. At this moment, the giant dragon disappeared in a flash after slaughtering the 200,000 people. When it reappeared, it was already in the sky. It lowered its head and glanced at the billowing smoke on the East Pole Island below. It chuckled twice. Then, with a slight flap of its wings, it was thousands of kilometers away. In the next 3 days, 5 or 6 bases were destroyed by the giant dragon every day. Of these 5 or 6 bases that were destroyed, not a single person survived. For a time, the entire Flaming Dawn continent was in a state of panic. The corpse general virus was already enough for them. It was not easy for them to build a base under the leadership of various heroes. But now, a giant dragon had appeared out of nowhere and easily destroyed several bases. Its destructive power was even more terrifying than the zombie virus. If this continued, would it not be long before it could destroy all the bases on the continent? At the same time, these people could not understand. Why would a creature that they had always worshipped as totems be so cruel? On Hunting Island No. 1, Mosher's heart skipped a beat when he saw this news. Could it be that the system had predicted that an evil dragon would suddenly break into the Flaming Dawn continent and wreak havoc when it asked him to slay the dragon? Since slaying a giant dragon could increase his level by 1 level. Of course, he had to give it a try. On this day, the giant dragon came to the sky above another base. The people in the base had long been on guard. They had already activated the energy light shield. This khaki-colored energy light shield was like a huge bowl that covered the base. They knew that the giant dragon's destructive power was great, so they had specially reinforced this light shield. And the degree of reinforcement was extremely abnormal. It could completely withstand the simultaneous attacks of more than 20 Grand Desolate Masters. The giant dragon slowly flapped its wings and floated in the air. It was like an eagle overlooking its prey. At this moment, a voice sounded in its right ear. Kong Jiu, are you messing around again? The giant dragon chuckled twice. How am I messing around? I'm just here to do research. Don't you dare slander me. The voice came from the other side. I'm King Male Dragon. Why would I slander you? Don't force human words on me. Chapter 507. In the sky, the voice in the black dragon's right ear said, Kong Jiu, don't mess around. If you kill too many, the higher-ups will find out. Then, both you and I will face punishment. The black dragon seemed very impatient. I know. It's not easy to come out, and I still have to listen to your nagging. Annoying. After that, the black dragon hung up and disappeared again in a flash. When it reappeared, it was already thousands of kilometers away. In the next 2 days, the black dragon was still wandering around the flaming beginning continent. It did not go to the bases to kill. Instead, it kept wandering in the wilderness. But when it encountered lone humans in the wilderness, it would still reach out its claws without hesitation. Of course, those general corpses could not escape its claws. As long as it encountered creatures in the wilderness, no matter if they were general corpses or humans, it would kill them. On this day, it saw a mountain in the distance. This mountain was about 10,000 meters high. The entire mountain was covered in a layer of earthy yellow light. A base was formed around this mountain, within a radius of 100 kilometers. There were far more humans in this base than in other bases. But to its surprise, the base's walls were not high and did not look very sturdy. But there were not many general corpses in such a place. It even seemed that the general corpses were very afraid of this place. It seemed that they were afraid of something on this mountain. This made Kong Jiao a little confused. What the hell is on this mountain? Why don't you let me take a look? As he spoke, he circled around the base. The people in the base also noticed the black dragon. These days, the news of this evil dragon had spread throughout the continent. When people saw this evil dragon, they all cried out in surprise. Evil dragon! The evil dragon is attacking, hide underground. Open the door of the shelter, quick! Kong Jiao could not help but laugh out loud when he heard the words, shelter. Ha 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 ha, you lowly creatures, are you trying to make me laugh to death? Shelter. I'll make you feel lonely. As he spoke, he swept down from the sky. A pair of thick hind claws viciously clawed at the ground. Two huge ravines that were 1,000 meters long and 70 to 80 meters wide suddenly appeared on the ground. Rumble, the so-called air raid shelter that the humans had just called, was instantly destroyed. All the humans screamed and fled in all directions. The power of giant dragons was completely foreign, mysterious, and powerful to these humans. Many of them had cultivated for decades or even centuries. He thought that he was already very strong. But in front of this huge dragon, they were like a bunch of ants. The air raid shelter that they thought was impregnable was like an ant's nest in front of this giant dragon. This giant dragon didn't even use energy. Just its physical strength alone was enough to destroy everything. This filled their hearts with despair. Rumble, rumble, the evil dragon continued to wreak havoc. There was only one thing it loved in its life, and that was destruction. His superiors did not allow him to wreak havoc on this continent. He had been holding it in for a few days and had long been suffocated. It just so happened that there were many humans around the mountain today, so he decided to indulge himself for a day. With a swing of its giant tail, a large number of houses were destroyed amidst a cloud of dust. Hundreds of humans were sent flying. With a swing of its sharp claws, huge ravines appeared on the ground. It was as if there were huge wounds on the ground. Amidst the rumbling sounds of buildings being destroyed. Amidst the screams of the humans before they died, the evil dragon let out a laugh that sounded like sawing wood. Ha 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 ha, it was as if its perverted mind was satisfied amidst the destruction. At this moment, when these people were facing the end of the world, a voice suddenly sounded. Bastard, how dare you come to the flame-beginning ancient sect to cause trouble? You're courting death. Everyone looked up. In the sky, a figure was floating there. It was a lowly who looked to be about 12 or 13 or 14 years old. She had a pair of ponytails. Her appearance was very lovable. However, the way she spoke did not look like a lowly. Instead, she looked like a rough man. However, everyone knew that this person was none other than the sect master of the flame-beginning ancient sect, Luoli. A pair of angel-like energy wings grew from her back as she floated in the air. In front of the 1,000-meter-long giant dragon, she seemed so small. However, at this moment, in the hearts of these humans, her figure was so tall. When the giant dragon saw that this human was so daring, it sneered. A mere ant dares to be so arrogant in front of a giant dragon. Let me see what you're capable of. Luoli did not hesitate. In this world, there hasn't been a dragon slayer. I'll be the first one. As she said that, she moved her mind. A surge of dark green energy gushed out from behind her. This energy quickly condensed and took form behind her back. Soon, it condensed into a 1,000-meter-tall giant energy shadow. This giant energy shadow condensed a 2,000-meter-long giant spear in its right hand. Those who did not see this scene would never be able to imagine how shocking this scene was. This 1,000-meter-tall giant seemed to be connected to the sky and earth. The spear in its hand seemed to be able to pierce through heaven and earth. At a certain moment, this giant shadow roared. The spear in its right hand viciously pierced toward the giant dragon's chest. Puff! With a loud sound, the giant dragon was directly pierced by the giant spear. When everyone saw this scene, they were all delighted. It hit. It hit. After the giant shadow pierced the giant dragon, it slowly disappeared. Only the giant dragon in the sky was left. In the giant dragon's chest, there was a 20-meter-wide giant hole. Blood fell from the sky like a waterfall. On the ground, a huge pool of blood quickly formed. In the pool of blood mist lingered and blood chi overflowed. It looked very terrifying. The giant dragon's body was also constantly trembling. It seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Luo Li snorted coldly. A mere beast, even death can't wipe out its crimes. However, just as he finished speaking, the giant dragon in the sky that was already on the verge of collapse swayed twice and suddenly disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already behind Luo Li. At this time, there were no wounds on its body. On the ground, all the humans who saw this scene exclaimed in surprise. They clearly saw that the giant dragon's chest was pierced and blood was flowing like a waterfall. Why was it unharmed now? Luo Li's expression also changed and he cursed. Damn it, what the hell? Ha 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 ha, the giant dragon's unpleasant laughter could be heard. Lowly creature, how dare you try to kill a giant dragon? Are you King joking? As it spoke, it faced Luo Li and revealed its 10-meter-long claws that shone with a cold light. Chapter 508. Lori, a level 10 Grand Desolate Master. He thought that he was at the peak of the Flaming Origin continent. However, his full-powered attack had clearly pierced through the dragon's body. However, after the dragon's pierced body disappeared and reappeared, it was completely unharmed. This was completely beyond the knowledge of the people of the Flaming Origin continent. It was also beyond Lori's knowledge. At this moment, the dragon faced Lori and bared its sharp fangs. It extended its sharp claws that gleamed with cold light. Lori's attack had used up more than half of his energy. Seeing that the dragon was about to unleash its power, he had no choice but to dodge. She flapped her wings and instantly flew into the distance. Her speed was extremely fast. In almost an instant, she was already dozens of kilometers away. However, the dragon's body flashed and disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already in front of him. Then, the huge tail smashed down on Lori's head. Lori wanted to dodge but suddenly realized that she couldn't move at all. It was as if she had been imprisoned. In fact, it wasn't that she was imprisoned. It was that the space she was in had been imprisoned. This evil dragon was a space-type dragon. It could control the space within a certain range. When it used spatial imprisonment, it was as if the space was completely locked. Everything in the space couldn't move. Seeing the huge tail that was hundreds of meters long and dozens of meters thick coming down on her, Lori cursed in her heart. *CK, I'm finished just like that. All the humans on the ground were terrified when they saw this scene. The sect master of the Flaming Origin ancient sect was their life insurance. It was because of sect master Luo that the general corpse didn't dare to come close. If sect master Luo died, even if the evil dragon didn't kill them, they would probably die under the general corpse's claws in the near future. However, at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared behind the dragon without any warning. He was dressed in black and had an ordinary appearance. On his back was a pair of fiery red flame wings that looked very beautiful. In his right hand, a black chain was slowly thrown out. This chain was like a black snake that slithered through the air. In the blink of an eye, it had wrapped around the giant dragon's tail. Of course, the dragon also saw the black chain. However, it didn't take it to heart at all. Its tail was tens of meters thick. In its eyes, this chain was like a child's toy. How could it possibly take it to heart? However, when the chain wrapped around its tail, which was swinging downwards, suddenly stopped. The chain was pulled taut and its tail was suspended in the air. When the people on the ground saw this scene, they were all dumbfounded. A human was like an ant in front of a 1,000-meter-long dragon. However, this human used the chain to stop the dragon's tail from smashing down. This was truly inconceivable. Seizing the opportunity, Luoli fled far away. He turned to Emosher and said, "Brother, thank you very much. Otherwise, I would have lost my life." When the evil dragon saw that its tail was actually stopped by a mere ant, it was surprised and also a little annoyed. A mere ant dares to be so presumptuous. Amidst its anger, it suddenly turned around. Its giant tail swept horizontally and smashed towards Emosher. Emosher's figure flashed and appeared on the right side. He dodged the sweep of the tail, grabbed the chain at the same time, dragged the giant dragon, and smashed it towards the ground. This huge force was ruthlessly thrown towards the ground. Rumble, the 1,000-meter-long giant dragon was heavily smashed to the ground. A huge pit with a diameter of more than 1,000 meters was smashed into the ground. The ground around the huge pit cracked inch by inch. This scene was extremely visually impactful. The surrounding people were all dumbfounded. Luoli also gave Emosher a thumbs up from afar. "Brother, you're so King awesome." The giant dragon was heavily thrown. Although it wasn't injured, it was aggrieved. As the saying went, the damage wasn't great, but the humiliation was extremely strong. In its eyes, humans were completely ants. Perhaps in the entire history of the giant dragons, no giant dragon had ever been smashed to the ground by a mere ant in such a humiliating manner. In its fury, an extremely hoarse voice came from its throat. "Lowly reptile, you're courting death." As it spoke, its figure flashed and disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already in the sky. However, even if it used the teleportation technique, when it teleported to another location, it found that the inconspicuous black chain was still wrapped around its tail. What the hell was this thing? Naturally, it didn't know that this was the system's reward to Emosher, the dragon binding rope. And this wasn't its strongest form. If it was in its strongest form, this giant dragon probably wouldn't even be able to move. The dragon binding rope was condensed from the flesh and blood of infected creatures. Emosher had also condensed this dragon binding rope from the flesh and blood of a small number of infected creatures in a moment of desperation. If there were more infected creatures around, the effect of the condensed dragon binding rope would be much stronger than this one. The giant dragon saw that it couldn't use teleportation to get rid of the dragon binding rope. It simply stopped trying to get rid of it. Instead, it directly flashed its huge sharp claws and teeth at Emosher. It wanted to use its body to forcefully crush this lowly reptile. It wanted to let this lowly reptile know how big the gap between humans and giant dragons was. Its sharp claws slashed fiercely at Emosher. Emosher teleported and dodged its sharp claws. Then, a large saber appeared in his right hand. This large knife still looked unremarkable. From the shape, it looked like the pig slaughtering knife on Earth. However, compared to the pig slaughtering knife, it was a little bigger. It was more than 2 meters long. There were even a few circles of cloth on the handle of the knife. It looked completely like a street stall. The energy in Emosher's body crazily poured into this knife. The giant dragon didn't care about this knife at all. A hoarse voice came from its throat, "Reptile, die." As it spoke, its sharp claws had already grabbed at Emosher. Emosher sneered. The dragon salure in his right hand was raised high. "Today, with the long knife in hand, I will slay the dragon." The dragon salure in his hand suddenly slashed down diagonally. He didn't see any energy from the dragon salure, nor did he see any blade chi from the dragon salure. A crack instantly appeared in the center of the giant dragon's body. The upper half of its body slid diagonally to the left. Soon, it was separated into two halves. The cut was as smooth as a mirror. The two halves of the dragon corpse fell from the sky. In the end, it crashed heavily onto the ground. Blood splattered everywhere. When the surrounding people saw this scene, they were all scared out of their wits. Chapter 509. 1,000-meter-long dragon had been so easily slain by a human. Everyone present was dumbfounded. They all turned their heads and fixed their gazes on Immortal. Who was this human? How could he be so strong? With a casual wave of his saber, he killed the dragon. One had to know that sect leader Luo was a superhero in their eyes. He was the ceiling of the entire Flaming Land's combat strength. But even sect leader Luo couldn't do anything to this dragon, and he almost died under the tail of this dragon. But now, this man had slaughtered this giant dragon with just a casual slash of his sword. This was truly inconceivable. Immortal was also slightly stunned. Was slaying a dragon so simple? That was impossible. He was now a level 1 Grand Desolate Master, equivalent to a level 1 evolved dragon. He had just looked at the level of this dragon, it was a level 5 evolved dragon. Although he was a 4-winged demonic dragon, his combat strength was extremely strong. He could challenge these level 5 evolved dragons by 4 or 5 levels. But it was impossible to kill them with a single slash. Was this dragon-slaying saber that strong? Just as he was feeling puzzled, he saw the huge dragon corpse on the ground flash and then suddenly disappear. When it reappeared, the dragon had already appeared behind Immortal. It made a squeaking sound from its throat, gaga gaga. A mere reptile, do you really think you can slay a dragon? Immortal hurriedly turned around. He saw that the dragon was slightly flapping its wings and hovering not far behind him. And it seemed that this guy was still unscathed. When all the humans saw this scene, they were shocked again. Is this guy unkillable? It has clearly been cut in half, but it can still appear intact. What kind of technique is this? It's over, we're over, it's really over. At this moment, Immortal finally understood. This should be some kind of spatial illusion. On the surface, it looked like he had cut this guy, but in reality, he hadn't. A spatial dragon was not easy to deal with. At this moment, the dragon's huge tail slapped down at Immortal. Wherever the huge tail passed, the air seemed to be distorted. With a thought, Immortal's figure disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already thousands of kilometers away. The giant dragon was slightly surprised. There's actually someone who can teleport so far in this broken place. In the next moment, his mind moved. Immortal, who had just disappeared, reappeared at his original spot. Immortal couldn't help but be shocked when he saw this. This guy's spatial ability was truly a little perverse. He had already escaped for over 1,000 kilometers, but he was still caught by it. Ha ha ha. Do you think I can't do anything to you just because you've escaped thousands of kilometers away? Lowly human, pathetic reptile. Die. As he spoke, his giant tail once again smashed towards Immortal. This time, Immortal wanted to use the dragon's shadow step to escape, but he was unable to do so. His space was also sealed. The gigantic dragon's gigantic tail, which was hundreds of meters long and tens of meters thick, was already smashing towards him. In a moment of desperation, Immortal hurriedly sent out a thought. In the next moment, his figure instantly disappeared. The giant dragon's gigantic tail swept past the place where he had just been and then smashed heavily on the ground. Rumble, a huge ravine, which was thousands of meters long, was directly smashed into the ground. It was as if a rift valley had instantly appeared on the ground. Under this smash, the ground shook violently. People couldn't even stand properly. They all squatted down or simply sat on the ground. At the same time, they were a little worried about Immortal in their hearts. Just now, it seemed to have hit that person. It seemed that it didn't hit him again. They didn't see it clearly at all. Soon, the giant dragon gave an answer. It looked at the place where Emoshur had disappeared. It chuckled, hiding in space. Interesting. However, there was still a hint of disdain in his words. Playing with space in front of a space-type giant dragon was completely looking for trouble. He waved his right front claw gently, trying to pull Emoshur out of that space. However, with this wave, he found that the space didn't move at all. This piqued his interest. Looks like it's an interesting little toy. As a space-type giant dragon, he had always had a special liking for space-type treasures. Now that he found a space treasure that even he couldn't control, he was naturally very interested. Since I can't pull you out, I'll have to go in personally. As he said that, he moved his mind. The giant figure instantly disappeared. All the humans present thought that this evil dragon would quickly appear elsewhere after disappearing, just like before. However, out of their expectations. After this evil dragon disappeared, it didn't appear again. After waiting for a full 5 minutes, they still didn't see the evil dragon appear. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. What's going on? Gone, gone. That evil dragon and that human both disappeared. No matter what, as long as they're not here, it's equivalent to temporarily escaping death. These humans were all rejoicing. The flame-beginning ancient sect leader, Luoli, shook her head slightly. The pair of ponytails on her head swayed rhythmically as she shook her head. What a good person, what a pity. At the same time, in Emoshur's micro-world, Emma was talking to her son by the lake. Emma liked life here very much. There were no fights, no disturbances. Most importantly, her son was no longer stupid here. Instead, he had become very smart and sensible. Therefore, unless there were any special circumstances, she would always stay here and accompany her son. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared. The mother and son were very familiar with this situation. Big Brother Emma now called Emoshur Big Brother Emo. Her son also greeted Emoshur. Uncle Emo is here. Emoshur didn't say anything. Instead, he looked up at the sky. The mother and son didn't know what was going on. They also looked up at the sky. With a single glance, both of their expressions changed drastically. They saw a shadow suddenly appear in the sky. Gradually, the shadow became solid. It was actually a black giant dragon that was 1,000 meters long. From the head, it looked extremely ferocious and terrifying. Although the mother and son had seen Emoshur transform into a giant dragon before, the giant dragon that Emoshur transformed into had no evil intentions towards them. Therefore, they didn't find it very scary. However, when this giant dragon appeared, the mother and son felt a sense of terror from the bottom of their hearts. Big Brother Emo, isn't this an illusion created by you? Emma asked. She also knew who Emoshur was in this space. As long as Emoshur thought about it, he could create this world. With another thought, he could destroy this world. That was why she asked. In the sky, the giant dragon heard and laughed. An illusion created by him? You think too highly of him. Forget it, I'm not going to talk nonsense with you lowly insects. Die. Chapter 5:10. In the sky, the giant dragon spoke in human language with a hoarse voice. Is he an illusion? You think too highly of him. Lowly reptiles, I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. Die. As he spoke, he used his mind to seal the space where Emoshur, Emma, and the others were. Then, his huge tail once again smashed toward Emoshur and the others. On the giant dragon's ferocious face, a ferocious and human-like smile appeared. It seemed to have seen the scene of these humans being smashed into meat paste. However, at this moment, its huge tail that was smashing down suddenly became motionless. It was as if it was caught by an invisible giant hand. But it knew that this was not an invisible giant hand, but the space where its tail was located was locked. He looked at the 3 humans in front of him in surprise. How was this possible? How could these 3 mere insects lock down the space he was in? What surprised him the most was that he tried all kinds of methods to break free from this space lock. However, it was no use at all. The space where he was seemed to have formed a huge invisible ice block. And it had become a frozen fly in this piece of ice. Regardless of whether it used its physical strength or spatial skills, it was of no use. No, this is impossible. He roared in his heart. His body kept struggling. However, no matter how hard he tried, his body did not move. At this moment, his tail was suddenly torn off by a huge force. Blood immediately poured down like heavy rain. Roar, the Shurlong screamed in pain. He could feel that this was still some kind of spatial skill. His body was in this space. And when the space was torn apart, his body would naturally be torn apart as well. This time, panic finally appeared in his heart. What it was most proud of was its spatial skills. With its spatial skills, it could challenge other evolved dragons that were several levels higher. But now, all his spatial skills were completely useless here. And he could only watch his body being torn apart by the other party's spatial skills. Obviously, the other party had a spatial skill that was far more advanced than his. It had been crushed in the field it was best at. How could this not make him panic? Rip, along with the sound of cloth being torn, its wings were torn off. It wanted to open its mouth and spit out flames. However, it found that it couldn't even spit out flames. In the next moment, Ryup, its pair of front claws were torn off from its body by a tremendous force. Aooooooooooo, it screeched in terror. However, this was not the end. Rip, a pair of its hind legs were torn off. Fresh blood fell from the sky like a blood-red waterfall. Once again, a pool of blood formed on the ground. However, this time, it was unable to recover. Rip, its head was directly twisted off. Of course, the dragon wasn't dead yet. The vitality of dragons was extremely strong. Even if the head was cut off, the head could still live for several months. But at this time, the huge head let out a miserable shriek. No, as it screamed, its head was split in half. It was as if an invisible knife had sliced it open from the middle. Finally, under Emoshir's thought, the 1,000-meter-long dragon's body directly exploded. However, it didn't explode into a cloud of blood mist. Instead, it exploded into a colorful, extremely gorgeous firework with a diameter of 10 kilometers in the sky. At this point, the evil dragon Kong Jiu was dead. At the same time, the system's voice sounded in Emoshir's mind. Killed 11 dragons, level up. Name, Emoshir, level 2 Great Desolate Master, level 2 Evolved Dragon, level 10 Long Nian Shur, ability, click to expand, he easily leveled up. However, it wasn't easy. It was because this dragon followed him to the miniature world that he was able to kill it. Otherwise, with its spatial skills, he really couldn't do anything to it. It seemed that he had to be careful when he encountered a dragon in the future. Emoshir asked in his mind, how many dragons do I need to kill for the next level up? The system's voice sounded. Killed 10 dragons. Emoshir nodded. It wasn't a lot. Emma and her son still didn't know whether the dragon just now was real or fake. In this world, Emoshir was God. There was nothing that Emoshir couldn't do. In their opinion, that dragon was probably condensed by Emoshir to make them happy. Emoshir looked at the gorgeous fireworks in the sky and asked, is it beautiful? Emma and her son nodded. It's beautiful. Emoshir looked at the fireworks that were still exploding and said, if it's beautiful, then look at it a little longer. I'm tired, I'm going to rest for a while. After saying that, with a thought, his figure disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in the Dragon Valley of the miniature world. Next to the waterfall in the Dragon Valley, there was a peach forest. In the peach forest, there was a thatched hut. Emoshir's figure instantly appeared in the thatched hut. Lying on the bed in the thatched hut, listening to the sound of the waterfall outside the house, looking at the colorful peach blossoms outside the window, it was really a kind of enjoyment. But at this time, Mo sure didn't enjoy it. Instead, in his mind, he flipped through the dragon's memory. Generally speaking, after becoming a dragon, more or less, would have a little bit of dragon consciousness. Dragon consciousness was extremely protective of their brain. So it was almost impossible to plunder the memory of a real dragon. But in this miniature world, it was different. Mo sure could plunder the memory of whoever he wanted. Even if the dragon god came to this world, it would be played in the palm of Mo sure's hand. That dragon had a long life and had lived for more than 3,000 years. Its memory was also very complicated. Mo sure spent more than 3 hours to finish reading its memory. And after reading its memory, Mo sure felt like he had eaten a fly. Because, from the dragon's memory, he knew that the Flaming Land was actually just a laboratory in the dragon's world, or rather, an experimental continent. Flaming Land, wasn't that an experiment? Everyone on Earth thought that humans were the masters of all things. But in reality, Earth was just a hunting ground of the Flaming Land. Now the people on the Flaming Land thought that the Flaming Land was the most developed place in the entire universe. But in reality, the Flaming Land was just an experimental place in the dragon's world. F***ck. Mo sure couldn't help but curse. Was there an end to it? This feeling was like Deadpool discovering that he was just a comic character in a book, and everything around him was just a comic world. Mo sure shook his head repeatedly. Chapter 5:11. Mo sure felt like he had eaten a fly as he continued to look through the dragon's memories. The dragon's world was not a planet. Instead, it was a large star field. There were a total of 3,600 planets in this star field. There were dragons living on every planet. This was called the 10,000 Dragon Star Field, or simply the 10,000 Dragon Realm. In the dragon's knowledge, the 10,000 Dragon Realm was the center of the entire universe. And this was not just the dragon's knowledge, it was very likely the truth. Because in the known universe, almost all the star fields revolved around the 10,000 Dragon Realm. Other than that, these dragons did not find any other similar star fields. In the 10,000 Dragon Realm, there were countless dragons. These dragons were not only powerful, but their technology was also a level higher than that of the Flaming Land. In the 10,000 Dragon Realm, there were tens of thousands of laboratories. These laboratories had been around for a long time. For example, the Flaming Land was one of the laboratories. It had been more than 500,000 years since the Flaming Land had intelligent life. In fact, these intelligent life forms were scattered in the Flaming Land by the laboratories. Every creature in the Flaming Land had a specific number. The Flaming Land's name in the 10,000 Dragon Realm was Laboratory 666. The dragon scientists had set up an invisible barrier outside each laboratory. No matter how strong the creatures in the laboratory were or how advanced the technology was, they could not fly out of this barrier. For example, the 666 laboratories barrier was the border of the solar system where the Flaming Land was located. No matter how strong the people of the Flaming Land were or how advanced their technology was, they could never fly out of the solar system. Because at the border of the solar system, there was a barrier with a temperature of 30,000 degrees. As long as they touched this barrier, they would be instantly melted. The pitiful people of the Flaming Land were equivalent to birds in a cage. It was just that until now, they had not realized this fact. Mo sure saw this and felt like he had been f***ed by a dog. When he came to the Flaming Land from Earth, he thought he had escaped the cage. He did not expect that the Flaming Land was just an even bigger cage. However, Mo sure would not resign himself to fate just like that. The 10,000 Dragon Realm, right? One day, I will kill the 10,000 Dragon Realm. I'll let you dragons, who think you're the masters, have a taste of being dominated. After spending 3 hours, Mo sure finished looking through the giant dragon's macroscopic memories. Next, it was time to deal with some specific matters. Kong Jiao was an investigator sent to the Flaming Land. They were mainly responsible for research. To put it bluntly, they were here to observe the changes in the flaming continent over the past tens of thousands of years since the dragons had left. Although Kong Jiu was here to do research, he was actually just a temporary worker hired because there was a shortage of manpower in the laboratory. Kong Jiu's nature was to wreak havoc. Coming here, he naturally had to wreak havoc. Now that Emosure had killed him, there was no guarantee that it wouldn't cause a huge commotion. That would depend on whether those people would pursue the matter. After all, Kong Jiu was only a temporary worker and had not even signed a contract. There was no guarantee of personal safety. Moreover, it didn't have any family. It was just a hooligan. If the laboratory didn't pursue the matter, this matter would be over. However, if they encountered a serious researcher, they might not let go of this matter. Next, at least 5 dragon investigation teams would come to the Flaming Land to investigate. The strength of these investigation teams was not strong. However, if they died in the Flaming Land, then there would be more dragons coming to the Flaming Land. If this continued, Emosure would have to face thousands of dragons in the future. Emosure smiled bitterly. In the end, he still had to go against the dragons. Since the system had already planned for his future development, and things were indeed developing in the opposite direction of the dragons. So what if he became an enemy of the dragons? Thinking of this, Emosure's blood gradually boiled in his chest. He seemed to have seen the scene of himself facing thousands of dragons. Although there were thousands of dragons, he would go against the whole world. This feeling was really a little King cool. In fact, this was the adventurous nature of the demon dragon in Emosure's body after he evolved into a 4-winged demonic dragon. At the same time, in the outside world, those who were lucky enough to survive were secretly delighted when they didn't see the dragon and the human for a long time. The giant dragon finally left. However, at the same time, they were secretly worried. They didn't know how the human was now. Would he have died under the claws of the dragon? Lori had already landed on the ground. His gaze had been fixed on the spot where Emosure and the giant dragon had disappeared into just now. Although the city was now empty, he had a vague feeling that the human was not dead. As for why he had this feeling, he didn't know. Therefore, he just stared at that place. After more than 10 minutes, the air in that area suddenly distorted. Soon, a figure slowly appeared there. This figure looked very ordinary with an ordinary appearance. However, Lori recognized it at a glance. This was that person. Emosure could accelerate time in his own miniature world. Therefore, he looked through Longjiu's memories in the miniature world for 4 hours and even slept. Only 10 minutes had passed on the Flaming Land. Seeing Emosure appear, the people on the ground were all stunned. He's back. Where's the dragon? He looks unscathed. Could it be that he killed that evil dragon? How is that possible? You've seen the strength of that evil dragon. Do you think it's so easy to kill it? At this time, Lori condensed a pair of energy wings on his back and soared into the sky again. He cupped his fists at Emosure. Thank you for saving me from danger just now. May I know your name? Emosure glanced at Lori, then glanced at the humans below. He said indifferently. Soon, something big will happen. After he finished speaking, his figure flashed, and he had already disappeared. Lori was stunned. Damn, is he not giving me face at all? At this time, the Grand Elder below said. Sect Master, he's Island Master Mo of the First Hunting Island. Lori heard this and nodded slightly. Island Master Mo of the First Hunting Island? Interesting indeed. Hearing this, the rest of the humans came to a realization. He's Island Master Mo of the First Hunting Island. I've heard from others that the strongest person on the Flaming Land is Island Master Mo of the First Hunting Island. Today, I finally see him in person. I heard that he's the strongest person on the continent. However, as for how strong he is, no one knows. If that's the case, then perhaps he really did slay that evil dragon. Chapter 5:12. Mo sure did not care about those humans' admiration, gratitude, envy, and even gratitude to the ancient flame sect leader. He did not kill the giant dragon to save these people. He only did it to complete the mission given by the system and improve his strength. Moreover, he had understood a principle a long time ago: not all efforts would be rewarded, and not all good intentions would be rewarded. Many times, you put in a lot of effort but come up empty-handed. Many times, if you are kind to others and they are grateful to you, they may turn around and stab you in the back. Even if they do not stab you in the back, they will not be grateful. Therefore, Mo sure was indifferent to many things. After returning to the first hunting island, he was thinking about how to improve his strength. This time, the battle with the space dragon allowed him to understand the power of the space element. If he did not use any skills and just fought head-on, he could have easily killed that giant dragon. However, after the giant dragon used its space element skill, even he could only escape. If he did not escape into the miniature world, he might not have been able to kill that giant dragon. Therefore, it was imperative to improve his strength. However, it was difficult to improve his strength by killing those infected creatures. Therefore, Mo sure was considering whether he should take the initiative to attack instead of waiting for those giant dragons to come. Go directly to the Myriad Dragon Realm. Kill those giant dragons in the Myriad Dragon Realm and improve his strength. Of course, this would require him to take a huge risk. It was best not to go before he had a good plan. At the same time, in the Myriad Dragon Realm, on one of the planets, in a research institute, a human was sitting leisurely in an office. To be exact, he was not a human. He was a giant dragon. Although the giant dragons looked down on humans, they had to admit that the human body was much more convenient than their dragon body in daily life. The smallest dragon body was 100 meters long. Many of them were thousands of meters long. With such a huge body, it had a huge advantage in battle. In the entire universe, there were no races that could be a match for the dragon clan. However, in daily life, it brought them a lot of inconvenience. For example, their huge bodies were a hindrance when it came to delicate work like scientific research. On the contrary, the seemingly small and weak bodies of humans were very handy in this kind of work. Thus, the dragons used an advanced genetic medicine to temporarily transform their bodies into human bodies. This drug allowed them to freely switch between their human and dragon forms. This dragon was called Shuai-yang. The giant dragons of the Myriad Dragon Realm all had their own attributes. Generally, dragons used their attributes as their surnames. For example, Kong Jiu was a space-type giant dragon, so his surname was Kong. Shuai-yang was a giant dragon of the water attribute, so his surname was Water. Shuai-yang and Kong Jiu were playmates who played together when they were young. After growing up, Shuai-yang became a researcher while Kong Jiu had nothing to do and became a slacker. In recent years, Kong Jiu came to Shuai-yang and asked him to find a good job for him. Shuai-yang had no choice but to arrange for Kong Jiu to be the investigator. The job was very simple. It was to go to those experimental planets to investigate and then report the actual situation of those planets. There was nothing technical about it. But Kong Jiu, this guy would feel uncomfortable all over if he did not stir up trouble for a day. Over the past month, he had stirred up quite a bit of trouble. Shuai-yang had to clean up after him every time. This time, he went to experimental planet number 666 and this guy went around slaughtering the creatures of that planet. If this was discovered by the supervisor, he would be fired. Shuai-yang originally planned to personally make a trip to experimental planet number 666 and bring that guy back if it really did not work out. But he did not expect that guy to suddenly lose contact. He had not been able to contact him for several days. Even when he used the long-range life detector to detect, he did not discover the existence of that guy. It was as if he suddenly disappeared from the face of the earth. This was an unexpected surprise. If that guy could really disappear from the face of the earth, then he would thank the heavens and earth. But Shuai-yang was also somewhat surprised at the same time. Logically speaking, with the strength of a giant dragon's body, on experimental planet number 666, there was no creature that could hurt him. How could he suddenly disappear without a trace? Could it be that on that planet, a more powerful creature had already evolved? Although this idea was somewhat absurd, he still kept it in mind. Looks like he had to find an opportunity to personally make a trip to experimental planet number 666. After Wang Yi dealt with Kongjiu, from Kongjiu's memories, he knew that under the Sea Heart waterfall, there was actually a spatial portal. It was a two-way portal from the Flaming Land to the Myriad Dragon Realm. At first, Mo wondered if he could close this portal. But after thinking about it, he decided not to. Now, more than half of the Flaming Land had been infected by the general corpses. No matter how strong he was, he could not be faster than the general corpses. Even if he closed this portal, the Flaming Land would eventually reach the end of the world. And even if he closed this portal, with the means of the Myriad Dragon Realm, they could easily open it again. Therefore, he did not bother to do this. As for what to do if the giant dragons of the Myriad Dragon Realm came, Mo had already thought of a countermeasure. At worst, he would move the entire Dragon Palace into the miniature world. The size of the miniature world now could completely accommodate the entire Dragon Palace. In the following days, Mo basically killed those general corpses every day. Although the kill points obtained from killing these general corpses were very little compared to the 10 trillion that Wang Yi needed to level up. Even if he killed everyone in the Flaming Land, he would not be able to obtain 10 trillion kill points. But Wang Yi did not kill these general corpses just for the kill points. His true goal was to obtain evolution points. The more evolution points he had, the more demon-suppressing orbs he could sign in for. On this day, Mo came to a city. In the past, this was a densely populated city. But now, there was not a single person in the city. Looking down at this city from the sky, he saw that this place was no longer as prosperous as it used to be. It was late autumn. This place was desolate. The fallen leaves on the streets kept rolling forward in the autumn wind. Collapsed walls, dilapidated buildings, and crooked doors all told that this city had once experienced a great battle. That was more than a month ago. This city was broken through by the general corpses. Almost all the humans were transformed into general corpses. There were only a few hundred survivors left, and they had already fled with their hoverboards. Logically speaking, if there were no humans within a radius of dozens of kilometers, the general corpses would lose their target and stay here, waiting for the next target to appear. But for some reason, the general corpses in this city had disappeared. The entire city seemed to be a ghost city. Chapter 5:13. When Mo flew over the city, he felt a little strange. This city seemed to be different from the other cities that had been conquered by the general corpse. It was too quiet, so quiet that it felt a little strange. He used the demon dragon's eye to look at the city. He didn't find any problems. It was just that he felt that there was something wrong with this city. Originally, with his cautious personality, he wouldn't rashly go down at this time. However, the risk factor in the demon dragon genes made him want to go down and explore. After a while, he made up his mind. Then he would go down and take a look. After all, he was now the peak of the Flaming Land's combat power. And he was far stronger than the Flaming Land's combat power. On the Flaming Land, there weren't any creatures or weapons that could really hurt him. Thinking of this, he retracted his wings. He slowly floated down to the ground. Stepping on this street full of leaves, he felt that something was wrong with this city. As for what was wrong, he couldn't tell. In short, it was just a feeling. Mo's dragon sense enveloped the entire city as he slowly walked forward. Currently, his level 10 dragon will could reach up to 10 kilometers underground. But even so, when he walked in this city, he didn't find anything. He slowly walked from the center of the city to the east. After walking for half an hour, he didn't find anything. He sped up and continued to explore the entire city. However, after spending a full hour, he still didn't find anything. In the end, Mo shook his head. A pair of wings appeared on his back. he instantly catapulted to 1,000 meters in the air. He looked down at the wilderness around the city. Although it was late autumn, there were still many living creatures moving around in the wilderness. Although many of the plants were close to yellow, there was still some green. Especially some evergreen plants, they were still dark green at this time. On the other hand, the city was dark and gloomy. It was like the gray color that the screen turned after the protagonist died in a game. Emosure took one last look at this place and shook his head. He flapped his wings and flew into the distance. Not long after Emosure left, more than 50 kilometers underground in this city, a blood-red eye suddenly opened. In the next few days, Emosure continued to kill these general corpses. Without using the demon-suppressing orb, Emosure had used the dragon slaughtering saber to kill the general corpse. Basically, no matter how strong the general corpse was, the dragon slaughtering saber only needed one slash to finish it off. As he used the dragon salure more and more, he became more and more familiar with it. Furthermore, he discovered that the dragon salure seemed to be consciously accepting the energy in his body at times. For example, when he poured his energy into the dragon salure could only passively accept it at the beginning. But later on, it seemed to be absorbing his energy on its own. Even if he didn't inject it, it would still continue to absorb the energy in Emosure's body. Sometimes, Emosure was afraid that he would lose control and let the saber absorb too much energy. Fortunately, he was still able to control himself. With just a thought, he could cut off the transmission of energy. Of course, this saber absorbed a lot of energy, but it was also more spiritual than other sabers. Emosure had always felt that as soon as he raised the knife, it would know where to cut. This made Emosure suspect that the saber had its own consciousness. However, Emosure asked the system a few times, and the system's answer was negative. No. This made Emosure very puzzled. However, since he didn't understand things, Emosure temporarily put it to the back of his mind. On this day, Emosure came to another city. This city had already been breached. However, unlike before, there were countless general corpses in this city. Moreover, these general corpses were not of low levels. Emosure glanced over. Basically, more than half of these general corpses were evolved general corpses, which was equivalent to desolate hunters. One had to know that almost all the desolate hunters on the Flaming Dawn continent had fled. Almost all of the remaining were desolate hunters. After desolate hunters transformed into general corpses, although their strength would be greatly increased, it was impossible for them to directly break through from desolate hunters to desolate hunters. In other words, these general corpses had used some kind of method to become evolved general corpses after transformation. No one knew what method they used. However, Emosure didn't care about this. He only cared about killing. These general corpses, whether male or female, old or young, when they saw Emosure, a human, appear, they all roared and pounced towards Emosure. Emosure took out the dragon salure and poured the energy in his body into the dragon salure. When the general corpses approached, he waved his right hand lightly. He didn't see any energy spreading out. All the general corpses around him instantly disappeared. One slash, instantly killing thousands of evolved general corpses. However, this was just child's play. After he killed these thousands of evolved general corpses, tens of thousands of general corpses began to surge out from the surrounding buildings like a tide. All of them surged towards Emosure. They were like a torrent, wanting to drown Emosure. Like a giant beast, they wanted to devour Emosure. Emosure estimated that there were about 100,000 general corpses in the entire city. And at this moment, these hundreds of thousands of general corpses were all rushing towards Emosure. If one were to look down from the sky, it would make one's scalp go numb. However, Emosure remained motionless in the face of so many general corpses. The tip of the dragon salure in his right hand was pressed against the ground. Energy flowed along his right arm and continuously poured into the dragon salure. At this moment, he actually had a feeling. The dragon salure was very excited. It seemed to be a little excited. It was eager to give it a try. When the general corpses were only 100 meters away from him, and would be able to pounce on him with just one more jump, Emosher finally moved. The dragon salyer in his right hand gently swung out in a circle. At this moment, all the general corpses that were pouncing towards him disappeared. It was as if everything that had happened just now was just a nightmare. When the dream was over, everything disappeared. These hundreds of thousands of general corpses, and half of them had reached the level of hunters evolved general corpses. Under Emosher's slash, they all disappeared in an instant. If this scene was seen by others, they would probably be shocked to the point of being a god. Even the sect master of the flame beginning ancient sect, that level 10 great desolate master, was far from being able to do this. Emosher instantly killed hundreds of thousands of general corpses with a single slash. However, he did not relax. Instead, he once again poured the energy in his body into the dragon salyer. Because he could feel that there was still a big boss hidden in this city. Sure enough, a moment later, a figure slowly appeared from the ruins in the distance. Chapter 5:14. The figure had the outline of a human. However, it was 300 meters tall. There were circles of fat on its body, making it look like a spokesperson for Michelin tires. Just the stubble on the side of his huge mouth was as thick as a tree. It was completely naked as it stared at Emosher in the distance. It let out a roar from its throat. A mere human dares to hurt the descendant of Jiangchen? You're courting death. Its voice was extremely hoarse, as if it was sawing wood. Emosher sized up the general corpse from top to bottom. The blood demons I had already seen its level. Species, general corpse, level 3 super evolved. A level 3 super evolved general corpse was equivalent to a level 3 grand desolate master. The evolution of these general corpses was too fast. It had only been slightly more than 3 months since the first corpse had been retrieved. In such a short time, a super evolved general corpse equivalent to a grand desolate master had appeared. Emosher couldn't help but frown slightly. If the evolution speed was like this, would there be an existence stronger than a level 10 grand desolate master? However, he was soon relieved. The 10,000 Dragon Realm had strict restrictions on the combat strength of these laboratory creatures. No matter how strong the creatures on these experimental planets were, their final combat strength couldn't exceed the limit. On the flaming beginning continent, the highest level of the creatures on experimental planet 666 was equivalent to a level 10 grand desolate master. Therefore, Emosher could be at ease as the ceiling of his combat strength. With a thought, Emosher first plundered the general corpse's memories. However, after looking at these memories, Emosher shook his head. This general corpse's memories were very chaotic. Its memories were made up of countless fragmented memory fragments. Moreover, many of these memories didn't seem to be its own memories. It should have received the memories of some other creatures. There was no way to find the pattern of these memories, nor could he piece them together. Emosher didn't bother about these things anymore. Looking at the giant Michelin spokesperson that was more than 300 meters tall, he said mockingly, "Descendant of Jiangchen? You think too highly of yourself. At most, you're Jiangchen's fart." The general corpse roared, "How dare you? How dare you insult forefather Jiangchen? You're courting death." As he spoke, he strode towards Emosher. Rumble, rumble, with every step it took, its huge feet left a fat footprint that was more than 50 meters long on the ground. With every step it took, the fat on its body jiggled like jelly. The old bird between its legs was also constantly swaying. Emosher felt a chill run down his spine. This guy's appearance was too disgusting. It arrived in front of Emosher and stomped down on Emosher with its gigantic foot. Emosher leaped back lightly, causing the giant palm to miss. Rumble, the giant foot missed and stepped on the ground, causing the ground to shake a few times. The next step was certain. Crack, 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 the giant foot began to split into 5-meter-thick python-like tentacles, which shot toward Emosher to entangle him. Emosher's figure flashed again, retreating more than 100 meters. Although the giant pythons couldn't reach Emosher, they all opened their mouths. Their mouths were like pea shooters, shooting out hundreds of blood-red beans. All the blood beans were the size of a human head. They shot towards Emosure like bullets. When they were 5 meters in front of Emosure, they all opened up. Only then did Emosure realize that these blood beans were actually blood spiders. Each of them had 8 legs, and their small heads had blood-red fangs that were shaped like a figurehead. They looked very ferocious. These spiders all flew towards Emosure. This reminded Emosure of the face-huggers in Alien. They also flew to people's faces, burrowed into people's mouths, and laid eggs in people's stomachs. However, unlike those tragic characters in Alien, Emosure was very strong. With a thought, he easily suspended these blood spiders in the air with his dragon will. But at this moment, the abdomens of these blood spiders shot out dark green beads. They shot towards Emosure. Emosure leaned to the side. Whoosh 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 whoosh, several blood-red spider webs were nailed into the tree behind him, which was so thick that it would take 2 people to wrap their arms around it. The remaining leaves on the big tree quickly turned yellow. The trunk of the big tree quickly turned gray where it was shot, and grayish-white pus flowed out. In a moment, the entire tree turned gray, and a large amount of pus seeped out. What a good housework! Were these spider silks so poisonous? Emosure also saw it. He raised his head and looked at the giant Michelin spokesperson. This guy's attack was really impossible to guard against. At first, it was just a stomp, which made people wonder why this guy's attack was so low. He didn't expect that this was just the beginning. Next, it split into tentacles, spit out spiders, and spit out spider silks. Emosure didn't expect this. At this moment, the blood spiders and tentacles melted into gray liquid and wriggled towards its feet. Soon, they merged into its feet. Emosure was secretly amazed. What kind of monster did this zombie virus create? The giant general corpse was also a little surprised. You lowly human are very agile. Try this again. As it spoke, its huge right hand clenched into a huge fist the size of 2 or 3 stories and suddenly punched towards Emosure. To be precise, its fist didn't swing out like a human's. Instead, it was as if there was a spring in its arm that shot out directly. So it was extremely fast. Fortunately, Emosure's speed wasn't slow either. He gently jumped to the right and dodged this punch. But suddenly, the left fist came at him again. Emosure jumped again and dodged. At this moment, the guy's fists were like the wind, bouncing towards Emosure. Emosure dodged again and flashed back 10 meters. But at this moment, he suddenly felt that something was wrong under his feet. Looking down, he saw the grayish-white liquid seeping out of the big tree. Just as he noticed the grayish-white liquid, the ground under his feet suddenly changed again. The grayish-white liquid actually wriggled quickly and quickly wrapped around Emosure's legs, and kept drilling under Emosure's skin. Good job! This was the liquid that seeped out of the poisonous silk spat out by the blood spider's mouth after poisoning the big tree. He didn't expect that even this liquid could move. F***ck, this was a little ridiculous. Emosure could only move his mind and instantly disappear. When he reappeared, he was already 1,000 meters away from the general corpse. The general corpse looked at Emosure mockingly. You human, are quite interesting. You can actually dodge my consecutive attacks, then, try this. Before it finished speaking, it suddenly felt a chill in its body. Then, its upper body diagonally slid to the left. Its body was actually broken into 2. There was still steam coming out of the broken part. Chapter 5:15. That giant general corpse's previous attack was already very strong. But in fact, that was not the manifestation of its true strength. Previously, this was just an appetizer. Its true combat strength was much more terrifying than what it had displayed earlier. However, Emosure did not give it a chance to display its true strength. The dragon-slaying saber waved gently. The upper body of the giant general corpse slid down to the left. The giant general corpse felt that it did not move, its legs did not bend, and its waist did not bend. How did it get lower and lower? Looking at the other half of its body, it was shocked. He even said, "That's right. What a fast saber." However, he was only surprised. There was no fear at all. This was because the self-healing ability of a general corpse was already very abnormal. And after becoming a super-evolved general corpse, its self-healing ability was even more abnormal. To put it bluntly, even if you took its head off and used it as a ball, you could play a 90-minute match. Including the injury stoppage time, it would be a total of 95 minutes. After kicking it, you could put its head back. It could also come back to life at any time. Therefore, when Immortal cut its body into two, it did not panic at all. This was much better than having its head kicked like a ball. The fat on its face even squeezed out a smile. Looking at Immortal, it made a rustling sound like sawing wood. "Lowly human, do you really think you can kill me?" Immortal ignored him and put away the dragon-slaying saber. A pair of wings condensed on his back, and with a leap, he was high into the sky. With a slight flap of his wings, he quickly flew to the next city. The general corpse was stunned and could not help but fly into a rage. "Brat, who are you looking down on? Come back here, do you really think this is the end? Even if you escape to the ends of the earth, I will still hunt you down, chop you into pieces, and feed you to the corpse dog." However, when he said the last sentence, his aura suddenly lowered. The last word, dog, could only be seen moving his lips. Because it had discovered a terrifying fact. Its body, which should have healed on its own, was not healing on its own. Instead, it was quickly turning into mucus. No, how was this possible? How could it not heal on its own? Extreme fear and panic began to appear in its eyes. The reason why general corpses were so powerful was because they could not be killed. Therefore, even in the face of humans who were 10 times or even 100 times stronger than them, they still dared to fight head-on. But now, with a single slash from this guy, it actually lost its ability to heal itself. How could it not be afraid? Under such fear, his body turned into a pool of blood. Before it lost its last bit of consciousness, it still couldn't figure it out. How did this human do it? When the zombie general lost consciousness, Immortal, who was flying in the sky, suddenly heard the system's voice in his mind, killed one super-evolved general corpse. Obtained 100 million kill points. Total kill points, 102,33408. Immortal paused. Previously, when he killed ordinary general corpses, he only gained 0.1 kill points. Only by killing an evolved general corpse could he gain 1 kill point. Killing another super-evolved general corpse would give him 100 million kill points. Oi, oi, oi. System, your slaughter point system is a little exaggerated. The system's voice quickly came. Every super-evolved general corpse has gone through countless trials of life and death, and stood out from millions or even tens of millions of general corpses. Their combat power, memory, physical strength, and other aspects far surpass evolved general corpses. So it's not exaggerated at all. Immortal chuckled. This isn't F*King exaggerated. That's 100 million times. Do you have any shame? The system immediately fell silent. When the system fell silent, Immortal felt helpless. But so be it if it collapsed. After all, according to the system's calculation, as long as he killed 99 super-evolved general corpses, he would be able to level up again. But where would he find 99 super-evolved general corpses? The system had just said that every super-evolved general corpse stood out from millions of general corpses. It was too difficult to find a super-evolved general corpse. System, where are the super-evolved general corpses? Can you give me a hint? Immortal asked. The system was speechless. Still, there was silence. Immortal felt helpless again. However, according to Immortal's thoughts, the higher the number of general corpses, the more likely it was for super-evolved general corpses to appear. Therefore, he had been going to the big cities for the past few days. In the base on the ground, the humans were surprised when they saw a human flying past them. In the current apocalyptic world, it was no longer suitable for survival outside the base. Other than the heroes with special abilities, the rest of the people, including the Grand Desolate Masters, could only stay in the base obediently. Now, this human was flying around in the sky all day long. Was he tired of living? While Emosure was killing the general corpses were constantly attacking the bases. When the bases were first built, there were more than 1,500 of them. Now, 3 months had passed, and more than 200 bases had been attacked. As the general corpses evolved faster, their abilities grew stronger as well. The bases were being attacked faster and faster. This once again caused a large-scale panic among the surviving humans. Everyone was pessimistic. It seemed like the humans could not fight against the super-evolved general corpses. The safe zone around the ancient flame sect was shrinking again and again. In the beginning, the safe zone was within 300 kilometers of the tumor. However, slowly, the safe zone was reduced to 150 kilometers. 100 kilometers. Now, the humans could only move within 80 kilometers of the ancient flame sect. General corpses began to appear outside of 80 kilometers. The ancient flame sect's sect leader, Lori, killed the general corpses easily in the beginning. Gradually, it became more and more difficult for him to kill the general corpses. Among the humans, there was a saying that the last great cleansing of the apocalypse was coming. The humans had no hope anymore. This was the punishment from the heavens. The humans had been researching all kinds of viruses and thought that they could play with these viruses in the palm of their hands. Now, the humans were suffering the consequences of their own actions and were being played by the viruses. In such an environment, the number of super-evolved general corpses Emosure encountered slowly increased. In the first few days, he encountered one. Later on, he encountered one almost every day. Now, he would encounter super-evolved general corpses in almost every city, regardless of whether it was a big city or a small town. His kill points were also constantly increasing. Gradually, his kill points were nearing 500. However, Emosure felt that this was not fast enough. One must know that the 10,000 Dragon Realm would send people to Earth to investigate Kong Jio's death. If he could not increase his abilities too much before that,